My mother always loved to tell me about her hardships since I was young. She said my grandfather abused her from a young age, often beating her half to death, so I never gave him a good look. She said my dad was ugly and gambled when he was young, and he beat her so badly that she had a miscarriage, which made me hate him deeply. In the end, I firmly sided with my mother, which eventually led to being disowned by everyone. My mother, however, looked heartbroken in front of everyone, saying she never expected me to be so cold-hearted, that no one burned paper offerings for me even after my death. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the year I was 8. In front of me was a two-tiered cake with a big peach on top, and next to it was a familiar little old man. This was the day of my grandpa's 54th birthday. I looked at Grandpa. His hair was graying, but he was still hale and hearty. Sitting right beside me, my eyes welled up with tears. When I died, the kidnappers had called everyone in the family, but only Grandpa, besides my mom, had answered. I still remember how his voice trembled on the phone that day. "Don't you dare lay a finger on my granddaughter. I'll get the money for you." I never showed him a kind face my whole life, and even drove him to the hospital a few times, yet, in the end, he still remembered I was his granddaughter. "What's wrong with Maeve?" Seeing me stare at him in silence, the old man asked cautiously. I shook my head, the hair by my ears hiding the tears in my eyes. Everyone knew I didn't like my grandfather, yet I still took the seat closest to him. My mom specifically picked out the seat for me before we sat down. Before we took our seats, she pulled me aside and said, "Maeve, I know what your grandfather put me through when I was a child, but I toughed it out and made it this far. I know you don't like him, but it's his birthday today. Please, don't make a scene." Ever since I was little, I've heard countless stories about how my grandfather abused my mom, making her kneel on the cold floor all night in the dead of winter, withholding her meals, throwing her school bag into the furnace, and so much more. So, from a young age, I've always seen my grandfather as the villain. Whenever he came to visit, I never gave him the time of day. "Did you see the cake on your grandpa's table? A huge two-tiered one, and Mom was the one who bought it," even though he never let her have a single decent bite to eat when she was a child. Now that he's old, she can't exactly hold it against him, my mother continued, squatting in front of me with a tone full of grievance. The last time she said this, it only stoked my anger towards my grandpa even more. How come he could treat my mom so terribly when she was young, yet now that he's old, she has to be so dutiful to him? I've always been able to empathize deeply with her. The hardships my mom went through could always move me to tears. She said she was an adult and needed to understand social interactions, so no matter how wrong she felt in the past, she couldn't express it now. Back then, I didn't know what social interactions were. All I understood was that these people had bullied my mom, and she had been wronged, so I had to stand up for her. So, from childhood to adulthood, I repeatedly expressed my dislike for my grandpa on her behalf. Every time he left sadly, my mom would bring me a pile of delicious treats and hold me in her arms, saying, "Mom didn't spoil you for nothing. You're the only one in the world who truly cares for Mom." After making a wish, my grandpa smiled and cut a piece of cake for me. The cake had most of a large peach on it, and he gave me the best part. In my past life, I didn't even take the cake in front of me. I just looked at him with a cold sneer and said, "Grandpa, after how you abused my mom when she was a child, you have the nerve to eat a cake she bought." My grandpa's face instantly changed color. My uncle, sitting across from him, slammed his chopsticks on the table. I turned and ran right after I said my piece. What I never knew was that after I ran off, my mom said to the others at the table, "She's so grown up and still doesn't know any better. Dad, please don't take it to heart. My mother-in-law has been filling her head with nonsense behind my back." She spoke with such frantic guilt that tears began to stream down her face. My grandpa patted her shoulder and said, "It's not your fault." Her grandmother looks down on our family. "You've had it hard. When my mother married into our family, we were in debt, and it was my grandmother who paid off the debt. So all these years, my grandfather felt indebted to my mother and grandmother. Every time I stood up for her, my mother would say it was my grandmother's teaching on my grandfather's side, and then on my grandmother's side, she would say it was all my grandfather's instigation. So I end up offending both sides, and both sides feel that my mother has had a hard time raising me, too." This time, I took the cake in my hand and smiled at my grandpa, saying, "Grandpa, happy birthday." My grandpa paused for a moment, then wiped his eyes and replied several times, "Happy, Grandpa, thanks, Maeve." The people at the table were a bit surprised. I had always been an unwelcome presence here, and they didn't expect me to behave today. My uncle laughed and said, "Maeve is in school now. All grown up. Dad, you're so happy." I took a bite of the cake, which had cheap cream but was very sweet. My mom suddenly stepped on my foot under the table, her eyes showing surprise and a hint of panic. If I become a well-behaved and grateful child, who will help her maintain her image of being hardworking and filial? She forced a smile and agreed with the people at the table. "Yes, our Maeve has grown up and knows best how to care for her mom." She emphasized the last sentence, turning to look at me with an expression. "When I was young, I tried to Ask my uncles if my grandpa was really as bad as my mom said. Every time I didn't even finish, my mom would give me a look. It felt like not believing her and not empathizing with her was a betrayal. I pushed the cake in my hand toward my mom and said to my grandpa, "Mom, eat up. My grandpa mistreated you when you were little, never letting you have anything good. Now eat more." The room fell silent for a moment. My grandpa's face turned sour, and my uncle scolded me. "Dad never mistreated my sister. Why are you talking nonsense again, kid?" My mom looked at the relatives at the table with a face full of regret and forced out a few tears, saying, "Please don't blame Maeve, this child." Before she could finish, I quickly interrupted her loudly. "I'm not making this up. My mom told me all of this. Besides, Uncle, how can you even say that? My mom told me you weren't exactly an angel when you were little either." My mom's face turned pale because we had agreed that I would never tell anyone that she told me these things. "Sister, what did you tell Maeve?" "Nothing. You know how this child always talks nonsense." As she was saying she wanted to pull me, I jumped off the chair, ran to my uncle's spot, grabbed his hand, and pointed to the earthen slope of my grandpa's old house, saying, "Mom told me you were a little tyrant when you were young, wouldn't even walk a few steps, always made her carry you, or else you'd get grandpa to beat her. Uncle, you were so mean." My uncle, hearing this, turned to my mom and asked, "Sis, when did I ever make you carry me?" I let go and ran to my aunt, saying, "Auntie, Mom said your family is greedy for money. When she married into your family, you didn't nearly drive her to death, and she had to scrape together a huge sum for you. Auntie, you're so greedy." My aunt was always a kind person and never asked for a large sum of money. Only after I died and was by my mom's side did I learn that my uncle had borrowed a sum for their wedding, but it had long been repaid. Hearing this, my aunt couldn't help but ask my mom, "Big sister, is this really what you've been telling the kids about me behind my back?" My mother's face went pale. She tried to grab me after a few steps, but my uncle held her back to ask what was going on. As I ran, I managed to offend every single person in the room. "Great aunt, Mom said you stole a pumpkin from her when you were kids. Because you took it, she almost starved. How could you be so mean, Grandpa? My mom said you used to beat her when you were young, and that you only married her off to my dad for money. Grandpa, is that what really happened? Did you sell my mom to my dad? Auntie third uncle's wife, I dislike you the most. My mom said you didn't do any good when you were young, and you were always flirting around the village." In the end, a group of people surrounded my mom and asked her questions. That night, after the banquet ended, my dad came to pick us up personally and took my mom, who was crying, back home. As soon as I got home, my mom, who had been holding it in the whole way, grabbed me and started yelling, "Maeve, why did you say that? Why did you smear me in front of so many people? How am I supposed to face my family now?" My dad, seeing her frantic expression, stepped in front of me to block her and gently tried to calm her down. I only said it once, and she already feels like she can't face anyone. Over all those years, she subtly steered me, nurturing a resentment towards all our relatives, so I would stand firmly by her side. Every time I lashed out on her behalf, she would then turn around and apologize to them, saying she was being ostracized, life was hard, and she was so sorry I'd been led astray. Winning herself a wave of sympathy in my past life, I believed my mother was the most pitiful woman in the world, that the whole world owed her, but the more I empathized with her, the more distant I grew from the rest of my family. In the end, when I was kidnapped, the kidnappers used my phone to call every relative in my family. At that moment, no one was willing to answer my call, except for my grandfather. My mom picked up and said, "Tell Maeve to stop messing around and come back right away. At her age, she doesn't know how to show some consideration for her mother. All she does is cause trouble." After hanging up, the kidnappers looked at each other in disbelief. They couldn't believe it, especially since they had sent my mom a video of me being brutally beaten, but my mom chose to turn a blind eye. After I died, I saw her sitting at home, surrounded by relatives from both my grandfather's side and my grandmother's side, all showing concern for her. She cried, saying I was reckless and ran around, resulting in being kidnapped and killed. The family was afraid he might do something drastic, so they quickly comforted her. My cousin, whom I had offended, bluntly said that she would be more at ease after my death. They had long disliked me, so my death was a good thing. The more they hated me, the more they pitied my mother. When the two families sat together, they realized no one had ever taught me to speak that way. In the end, they all agreed that I was just a naturally unlikable bad seed, and my death was not a loss. Thus, my death successfully bridged the gap between the two families and brought them back together. Maeve, hurry up and apologize to your mom. After much effort, my dad managed to calm her down and signaled me to apologize to my mom. I glared at him and shouted defiantly, "No, Mom was the one who told me those things in the first place. Why can't I say them, Maeve?" My father was so furious he lunged to grab me, ready to hit me. I screamed, "I won't listen to you. You're a murderer." My father was incredulous. "Who did I kill?" My mother's face went deathly pale. She instantly guessed what I was about to say and rushed over to shut me up, but my father stepped in front, blocking her. My mom said that when she was young, you beat her until she miscarried, you killed my brothers and sisters, you're a murderer, and when you were young, you didn't work, you just gambled all day. My mom said she was blind to have followed you. My dad looked at my mom in shock and anger, and she defended herself, saying, "This child is lying, don't believe her." "I'm not lying. My mom miscarried when I was about 2 years old. It was summer, she told me everything. Not all the lies my mom told me were completely made up, she would twist some truths and present them to me, so most of them felt very real. The moment my dad heard I could even name the exact time, he knew someone must have told me. It couldn't have been his mother or my grandpa's side of the family badmouthing him for no reason. That only left my mom. "That child was lost because you missed a step on the stairs. When have I ever laid a hand on you? When have I ever gambled away money? Samuel, Samuel, just listen to me." So that's why the child has never been close to me since she was little. What else have you been telling her besides all this? Were the things she said at her grandma's place also coached by you? They argued in the living room all evening, and I listened from my room. My mother started with loud justifications, then quiet sobbing, and finally admitted her side of things with a wounded, defensive tone. "I'm doing this for her own good. As a girl, she needs to learn how to be considerate. What's the big deal? They're family, she's just a kid, so what? If she's a bit annoying." She insisted she'd done nothing wrong. That night, my father stormed out in anger, slamming the door behind him. My mother cried in the living room for a long time, lamenting that no one understood her, before finally going to bed with hiccuping sobs. 5 Early the next morning, my grandma came over. She really doesn't like me, and by extension, she doesn't like my mom either. But my grandma hasn't always disliked me. My mom always tells me that I have a scar on the back of my head. It happened when my grandma was holding me, just learning to walk, at the door watching others play cards. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice I had wandered off and fell down a small step. She also said that as soon as she finished her postpartum confinement, my grandmother started making her life difficult in every way, and she resented me for being a girl, always finding ways to upset her. I don't know if what she said is true or not, but in my memories, my grandmother lived alone in the countryside, and every time my dad took me back to visit, she would prepare a feast to welcome us. As I grew older and my words became more hurtful, she didn't want my dad to bring me back anymore. As soon as she arrived, I knew my mom's life would be miserable. "Vivi, I heard you had a private chat with Maeve. What did you say? Come on, tell me too." My mom got a bit flustered. She's always been a little intimidated by my grandma. "Mom," the child, "Grandma, are you here to apologize to Mom?" I ran over and guided my grandma to the sofa. "After all these years, even though what you did back then was wrong, if you just apologize to Mom, I'm sure she'll forgive you." My grandmother's gaze fell on my mother, sharp as a knife. My mother stood to the side, wanting to pull me away but not daring to move. "Maeve, tell your grandmother, what exactly does your mother say I did wrong?" I told her everything my mother had drilled into me over the years. How my father gambled and hit people, how my grandmother mistreated her, and how, even though my uncle's family had money now, my mother said it wasn't clean money. Who knows if the construction projects they contracted cut corners. My grandmother was absolutely furious, especially when I told her that my mother had been saying behind her back that my uncle's construction sites cut corners. She shoved 10 yuan into my hand and told me to go downstairs and buy myself something to eat. My mom knew she couldn't escape this time, and at the door, she tugged at my hand. "Maeve, how can you not care about your mom at all?" "Mom, I care about you so much. I even made Grandma apologize to you. Grandma would definitely feel embarrassed with me here, so I'm leaving now." As I said that, I shook off her hand. As soon as the door closed behind me, I could hear the scolding inside. I bought an ice cream, sat in the park downstairs, and thought about the stupid things I did in my past life. 6. My uncle's family struggled through poverty for a lifetime, only turning things around. In recent years, they took on a project and became a small contractor. In the past, we always spent the new year at my grandmother's place in the countryside. Since my dad earned a bit more, my mom always stood tall with pride, her words brimming with confidence, especially before each visit. My mom would tell me how bad and pathetic my uncle's family was, and how she had tried to stop marrying my dad before she did so. At every family dinner, I'd parrot back all the things my mom had taught me to say. Since my uncle's family were the elders, they couldn't very well pick a fight with a junior like me. Eventually, they just stopped coming around much. Because of this, my grandmother grew to dislike me even more. In recent years, my uncle's family's fortunes have improved a bit. Now, my aunt can hold her head up when she talks to my mom, which really grates on her. Mom vents to me about it in private even more often, and then, as if on cue, the construction project my uncle had contracted really did run into trouble. An accident occurred to the construction worker. While the matter was still under investigation after the police were notified, the worker's family kept threatening and harassing my uncle's family. During that period, my uncle temporarily moved in with us with his child. At the time, the family members somehow found out where we lived, tricked us into opening the door, grabbed my mother, and threatened her with a knife. At that time, only I, my aunt, and my mother were at home. My mother, crying and in tears, shouted at me, Maeve, say something for your mom. I told you, say something. My mom privately told me that my uncle's family had been cursed for cutting corners, which led to someone's death. I cried out, it's not my mom's fault. It's my uncle who cut corners. Let my mom go. When the family learned that the contractor had cut corners, causing the accident, they were furious and immediately went after my aunt with a knife. My dad and uncle arrived just in time to save her. The family was taken away, but they firmly treated my accusation of cutting corners as evidence and sued my uncle instead. Although it turned out to be the worker's own fault in the end, the lawsuit was time-consuming and exhausting, and it completely severed the relationship between my grandmother's side and me. Because this incident caused quite a stir at the time, my father's job was also affected. From then on, my father completely gave up on me. My mother was different. She told me back then that one should understand the ways of the world, and she had to apologize. But since I was a child, I didn't need to. She went around saying she hadn't taught me well, apologizing while crying, and compared to my silent presence, everyone pitted her for having a child who was born to lie and cause trouble. A child is born a blank slate. As the first teacher in my life, she chose to teach me to smear it with the black ink of lies, and so black appeared on my page. It wasn't until much later, when I entered middle school, that I realized how terrible the things I did as a child really were. But by then, it was too late to fix many things. The family who had given up on me refused to take me back. Everyone in the neighborhood knew I was a bad kid. I talked back to elders, lied, and hurt people. They forbade their children from playing with me. So from middle school onward, I was always alone. And so came the outcome of being abducted, abandoned by all. No one was willing to believe I had truly been taken. No one called the police, and no one was willing to save me. Later, I died in that abandoned factory. My mother, meanwhile, became the most cherished person in the household. After my death, I lingered by her side for a long time. I watched as she became pregnant again and gave birth to another child. Perhaps life's hardships had confided enough in me, for with that girl, she never again spoke of the painful past, not of her father's gambling, nor of her grandfather's abuse. She never spoke of all those falsehoods. That girl was honest and lovely, and she was liked by everyone. My mother and that child both lived happily later, but I grew more and more resentful by her side. I always felt that I could have been this happy too, if I hadn't empathized with her. 7. I finished my popsicle and went upstairs. As soon as I opened the door, my mom was sitting on the couch, sobbing and wiping her tears. When she saw me come in, she gave me a resentful look. My grandma pulled me into the room and told me a lot. My dad has never gambled, and he has never laid a hand on her. When I was little, my grandmother accidentally dropped me while holding me. Overcome with guilt, she waited until my mother finished her postpartum confinement and then returned alone to the countryside. My uncle, for his part, has never cut corners in his work. I asked her, was Mom lying before? Why would she do that? My grandmother didn't answer. I think she probably didn't know why my mother had done it either. Why would a mother use her own suffering and lies to win her child's sympathy? Why use a child as a prop to build up your own image? My grandmother stroked my hair and said, I don't know, sweetheart, but it's okay. From now on, I'll be living here. Your mother won't be able to lie to you anymore. From that day on, my grandmother moved in to live with us. She keeps a close eye on my mom every day. My mom has tried multiple times to talk to me privately, but she hasn't found an opportunity. I started behaving like a normal child. My words no longer sounded harsh. I stopped provoking elders with sarcasm, and I became well-behaved and understanding. Since I died in middle school in my previous life, the third-grade homework now seems very simple to me. My grades have improved significantly, and my dad and grandma both believe I was corrupted by my mom before. They keep a close eye on me, but my mom still finds ways to privately ask me, why don't you care about Mom anymore? Isn't Mom the one Maeve loves the most? Why are you getting so close to Grandma? Mom, that's not right. I've wanted to say this since my last life. Perhaps the excessive seriousness in my eyes provoked her. She grabbed my shoulders with both hands and shouted at me. Who said that? Your grandmother told you again, didn't she? I'm your mother. Everything I do is right. What's wrong with you taking my side? You're my daughter. I watched her hysterical breakdown with a cold, Maeve-like gaze. In my past life, the person I used to be had earnestly analyzed the reasons for this. It was only because, for the first time in her life after becoming a mother, she gained the power to control others. That's why she was so eager to shape me into a being completely subservient to her. My existence satisfied her need for self-expression, her desire to confide, and had already garnered her a lot of attention and sympathy. But now, that power of control had been taken away, and she hadn't yet had the chance to exploit it for too much gain. Nor was she ready to lose that power, so she broke down and screamed, only to be pulled away by my grandmother. My grandmother said she was crazy, and she accused my grandmother of trying to take her daughter away. Just then, my father came home from work and pulled the two quarreling women apart. I stood quietly in the corner, as if stunned by them. That day, my father said something harsh to my mother for the first time. "If you keep making a scene, we're getting a divorce." My mother didn't want a divorce. After my maternal grandfather's birthday banquet, her relatives on that side had developed some reservations about her. If she left my father then, she truly had nowhere else to go. However, after that day, I noticed she really had calmed down. Though she now hates me. Uncle's family encountered the same issue as in my previous life, but this time I kept my dad and uncle around beforehand, making the problem easily resolved. The only thing that surprised me was that my mom was pregnant. When my mother shyly announced this news at the dinner table, the whole family was momentarily stunned. With my previous example of being spoiled, they didn't know whether this new child's arrival was a blessing or a curse. I can't be sure if this child, arriving earlier than expected, will be as fortunate as the last life. Regardless, this child cannot be rejected. The family's attitude toward my mother softened again, allowing her to rest and prepare for the pregnancy. After my mother became pregnant, she seemed to gain a sense of security at home and became increasingly blunt with me. Sometimes she'd pull me aside and warn me in private, "Maeve, you're not my only child anymore. You're a lost cause. I have this one in my belly now. Don't even think about competing with your little brother later." In her past life, this child was clearly a girl, but now she's dead certain it's a boy. My grandma always tells me not to take it personally with her. She's pregnant and her temper's a bit short. Grandma says I should be more understanding. I pay no mind to her warnings. If she tries to raise this child the same way she raised me, she definitely won't get the family's approval this time. The year I started middle school, I got into the best middle school in the county, and my mom gave birth. It was a baby brother. The whole family was overjoyed. My dad couldn't stop smiling all night, and the baby brother was named Ryan. Since the baby was still very young and couldn't speak, my mom taking care of him was very reassuring, so the family didn't have much concern about my mom. I buried myself in my studies, paying little attention to home, waiting in dread and anxiety for the kidnapping that was supposed to happen in my third year of junior high. The fact that my mother got pregnant earlier this time means a lot of things aren't going to follow their original course, but I'm still on edge. Even if I call my family now, no relative would hang up on me anymore. I never take that route, avoiding being alone at all costs, waiting with a mix of frantic worry and deep-seated fear for that impending calamity to pass. Meanwhile, I could feel the changes at home becoming more and more apparent. Because my mother had been very cautious in taking care of my younger brother in the first 2 years, the family gradually relaxed their vigilance. Now that my uncle's family is expecting their second child, my grandmother hesitated for a long time before deciding to go and help. In my third year of middle school, my younger brother was already 3 years old. Mom poured all her love into him, along with the lies she once told me. I had to go to school every day, so I couldn't keep an eye on them all the time, until one day when I came home from school, I opened the door, and a stream of water sprayed onto me. Sister wolf in sheep's clothing, down with the wolf in sheep's clothing. This scene felt so familiar, just like when I was little and would throw snacks at my grandpa the moment he walked through the door. That sense of familiarity made me realize in an instant what my mother had done to my younger brother. She was using the same methods on him that she had used to raise me. My heart sank. I rushed forward, snatched the water gun from his hands, and held him tight as he cried, preventing him from running away. "Apologize. What you did was wrong." My mom quickly came out, took my brother from my arms, and while comforting him, she scolded me. "It's just a child saying a few words, and you, as the older sister, have to make an issue out of it. You've read all those books for nothing." I coldly stared at her. "Isn't your life only worth living if you sacrifice a child?" My mom froze for a moment, then, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, she started yelling. "What are you talking nonsense about now? What do you mean by that? I'm your mother. You know exactly what I mean. When I was Ryan's age, I didn't know any better either, so I spoke without a filter. The moment my grandpa walked in, I'd call him a bad guy. I'd roll my eyes whenever I saw my aunt. I started crying the moment I arrived at Grandma's house. There are countless incidents like this. I've been disliked by my family since I was a child, so much so that no one would even burn joss paper for me when I die. And now, she wants my younger brother to follow in my miserable footsteps. My mother was so furious she wanted to hit me. I turned around, went back to my room, and shut the door. I could hear my little brother's childish voice. "Mommy, don't cry. Sister is bad." My feelings were a jumbled mess. I was on high alert all through my 9th grade year, but that kidnapping never happened. Maybe it was because I skipped a grade, shifting the timeline, or, and I'd like to believe this, perhaps my own changes meant such a thing would never occur. I did really well on my high school entrance exams, and my family was thrilled. Both sides of the family got together and booked a big private room to Celebrate. At the dinner table, Grandma asked my little brother, "Your sister got into a good school. What should you say to her?" Ryan didn't even look at me, clinging to my mom. He said, "I don't want to talk to my ungrateful sister. She's mean to mom. She doesn't appreciate anything." And here was this 4-year-old in kindergarten, already throwing around idioms. My grandmother immediately realized who had taught him to say that. She had thought my mother had reformed, but over the years, all the relatives in the family knew my mother was full of lies and had been teaching the children falsehoods. It wasn't just a passing discomfort to hear the lies my mother spread about them. Both sides of the family had long since lost any affection for her. My grandmother just glared at my mother and then told my father she wanted to move back. He agreed. On the way back that day, my mother kept wiping away tears. She cried in the car, saying that despite all her hard work for the family over the years, the relatives were all against her. My father fell silent. Over the years, he had endured my mother's behavior time and again, and the two of them had erupted into many arguments. In the car, there was only the sound of his sobbing and my younger brother's attempts to comfort him. "Mom, don't cry. They're all bad people. When I grow up, I'll go and teach them a lesson." "Dad, Mom is crying. Grandma and the others are bullying her. Go and stand up for her. You ungrateful brat. This is all your fault. You have no idea how to care for your mother. You've made her cry." The more my brother tried to console her, the darker my father's expression grew. He probably never imagined that, despite all their arguments, my mother was still raising my brother using the same methods she had used on me. My mother took one look at my father's dark expression. Realizing that her son was the only one in the whole car who cared about her, she fell silent, just holding my younger brother in her arms. I had a feeling my mother wouldn't stay quiet for long. Sure enough, the next day after my father left for work, she packed up and left home, taking my younger brother with her. Over the years, she's resorted to running away from home many times. When Grandma wanted to move back in, she disagreed and simply left, taking my younger brother with her. She then called every relative one by one, claiming my grandmother was trying to drive her to her death. Grandma was livid in the end, and she never came back. After arguing with my dad, she refused to back down and ran away from home, taking my younger brother with her. 2 or 3 days later, she had someone call my dad to say she and my brother were already on a train and would never be coming back. My dad was scared out of his mind, terrified they'd been kidnapped by traffickers. He pleaded and reasoned with her until he finally managed to talk them into coming home. Grandpa tried to talk her out of causing trouble, but she accused him of siding with my dad after taking that money, conspiring to bully his own daughter. Grandpa was so angry he ended up in the hospital. My uncle called and yelled at my mom, which made her so furious that she left home again with my brother. This time, the police helped find them. Coming home from school and seeing the empty house, I immediately realized something had happened again. My dad sat alone on the couch, his face full of worry as he looked at me. "Maeve, tell me, why does your mother act this way? Why does she teach your brother like that? What gives her the right to just take him and run away from home all the time?" 10. Because she's desperate for attention. My grandfather never abused her, but due to the family's poverty when she was young, he was busy making money and didn't have much energy to spare for her. Children who don't receive attention often grow up craving the gaze of others. Because she so desperately wanted to be loved and noticed by everyone, she didn't mind using her child to gain sympathy. The first attempt at exercising parental rights, absolute authority, and control over life made her forget to respect the independence of life, arbitrarily creating her own loyal followers. There were so many reasons, but looking at my father, I just couldn't bring myself to say them. Even with a blood connection, the bond between people needs to be nurtured. Because I was never a likable child, and I can't forget how the call I made to my dad after being kidnapped was cut off before it even connected. I never really had much affection for them to begin with. This time, my mother ran away from home with my younger brother and was gone for a week. Normally, they would never go this long without contacting me, unless something was seriously wrong. On Sunday, I received a phone call. "Hello, Maeve, it's me. It's your mom. Help me, Maeve. Your mom and brother have been kidnapped. You." Suddenly, there was a burst of noise on the other end, as if the phone had been snatched. "Your mom and brother are in my hands. Prepare 1 million to ransom them." Damn it, out of all the calls I made, you're the only one who picked up. I was almost frozen in place, unable to move. That voice, that was the voice of the person who kidnapped me in my previous life. I was very familiar with those two kidnappers and knew the location of the kidnapping. They were only after money and wouldn't harm anyone. In my past life, it was because I was so unlucky among all the contacts in my phone, my own mother wasn't willing to pay to redeem me. And my grandpa, an old man, looked like he had no money. In a fit of anger, they decided to kill me, but at this moment, I suddenly felt an intense desire to get back at my mother. I was beaten to a pulp, alienated by everyone for my mother's sake, yet my mother, the only one who could save me, chose to abandon me. I suddenly felt like abandoning her. Just once, the evil thought once it arose couldn't be suppressed. And I heard my own impatient voice from my previous life, just like my mother's. Mom, stop causing trouble with others. Dad is already angry. Don't you know how to feel sorry for him? As these words fell, I suddenly thought of my brother. He was truly innocent. Look, brother, send me a video. If it proves that you've really kidnapped my mom and them, I'll immediately tell my dad to prepare the money for you. Oh, and don't hurt my brother. He's not in good health and can't take it. It could easily lead to something serious. I immediately called my dad after hanging up the phone, telling him that Mom and the others had been kidnapped. My dad didn't believe Mom, but he believed me and rushed back home soon. I received a video on my phone. In the video, my mom was beaten and lying on the ground, while my brother was tied up and crying. After my dad arrived home, he prepared the money. We obediently delivered it to the location they specified, but in reality, the police had already surrounded the factory. By the time they got the money, the kidnappers were already under control, and my mom and brother were rescued. 11. My mom was seriously injured and lay motionless in the hospital for several days. I checked her call history. She had played the boy who cried wolf too many times, and when the wolf finally came, no one believed her. I thought she had been devastated, but after lying in bed for 3 days, the first thing she said when she saw me was an apology. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Maeve, Mom is sorry. I was wrong. While she was unconscious, she seemed to see my past life, but it doesn't matter anymore. I let it go when I made that phone call. She went through what I did in my past life, so she's paid the price. I don't want to dwell on the past anymore. After being discharged from the hospital, my mom returned to normal. She stopped running away from home and started properly raising my younger brother. I went back to school later. Those 2 criminals were caught, so I never had to worry about being kidnapped again. I don't know how to describe my feelings towards my mother now. I just know that I will never become someone like her in this lifetime. The end. Story 2. After being reborn back to 1957, as a 6-year-old, I anonymously mailed the enormous savings passbook and money orders I had found in my adoptive father's room to the police station, then completely vanished from public view. My adoptive father was a man of noble character and sterling integrity. When he was discharged from the military due to injury, he gave up his job opportunity at the Armed Forces Department and donated all his demobilization settlement funds to the families of his fallen comrades. After returning to his hometown to farm, he continued his exemplary conduct by helping neighbors and caring for the elderly and widowed. He said, when others are going through tough times, every little bit of help counts. Though our life was impoverished, we were rich in spirit, but I, who had proudly and diligently learned from him my whole life, only discovered after being reborn that my biological father, whom I had never met, had been sending him 100 or 200 yuan every month in an attempt to corrupt him. In 1967, I resolutely threw myself in front of a speeding jeep, actively ending my brief 16 years of life. Just when I thought I was going to die like this, the chaotic noises around me gradually became clearer, vaguely familiar in my days. Is this how you raise her? Annie is only 6 years old. 6. Do you even understand? Under the scorching sun, you make her carry a hoe to till the land for that young widow. Have you no humanity? The voice of an enraged young woman jolted my drifting consciousness awake. It's Auntie. The moment I recognized her voice, my heart swelled with bittersweet emotion. One, Auntie is still so wonderful. I was an abandoned baby that Grandma took in. My adoptive father was wounded in the war, so my grandmother registered me under his name, and we became a family. The year after my adoptive father was discharged and returned home, my grandmother passed away, and I lived with him. My adoptive father was a man of noble character and unwavering principles. When he was discharged due to his injuries, he gave up the opportunity to work at the Armed Forces Department and donated all his discharge settlement to the families of his fallen comrades. After returning to farm life, he continued his generous ways, helping neighbors and caring for the elderly and widowed, inspired by my grandmother's teachings. Since childhood and the villagers' constant praise, I admired my adoptive father and eagerly learned from him. At 6 years old, while helping my adoptive father weed for a pregnant widow in the village, I grew dizzy and weak from hunger under the scorching sun, and accidentally injured my ankle. In the countryside, minor bumps and scrapes are just part of life. My adoptive father had never cared for an infant before, so he didn't realize my fragile little body might not withstand it and didn't take it seriously. My wound got infected, and with a persistent high fever, I nearly didn't make it. It was my aunt, who had married within the same village, that came back to her parents' home, saw my condition, and rushed to fetch a barefoot doctor in a panic. That's how I managed to cling to life, but it left me with a lasting ailment. Ever since then, I've had to walk with a limp. Thinking of my aunt made me feel a sense of urgency. I wanted to open my eyes and see her. Since childhood, everyone told me to learn from my adoptive father, to embrace sacrifice, contribute selflessly, and help others without expecting anything in return. Only my aunt truly cared for me. She quietly reminded me to take care of myself, not to go thirsty, hungry, or push myself too hard. Every now and then, she'd slip me a sweet potato or half a steamed corn bun. Later, though, my uncle got a promotion, and she became eligible to join him as a military dependent. They moved to a remote island base, and we never saw each other again. About once a year or so, I'd still get packages from her with clothes and shoes. The clothes were hand-me-downs from my cousin, a year younger than me, already worn thin. The shoes were usually scuffed at the toes, coming apart at the seams, or with soles splitting open, and they were always a bit too small for me, yet being remembered remains my fondest childhood memory, filled with gratitude. I vowed to repay her kindness when I grew up. Unfortunately, during the Cultural Revolution's great link-up, the orphan child of my adoptive father's fallen comrade, someone he'd once helped, came to visit while passing through our area. He developed ill intentions toward me, and taking advantage of my father's distraction, cornered me in a room with violent intentions. Having done hard labor since childhood, I was no weakling. In the struggle, I accidentally killed a man. A life for a life. My upright foster father personally delivered me to the police station at just 16 years old, beneath my foster father's heartbroken and disappointed gaze. I was tormented by guilt, but still couldn't overcome my fear of death, so I ran. I seized the chance during a bathroom break to scale the wall and escape, but as I wandered the streets, my thoughts turned to the adoptive father who'd sacrificed so much to raise me. I pictured the disappointment in his eyes, and realized how absurd it was that I, with my lame leg and hobbling gait, could possibly evade a military man like him. He must have let me go on purpose, knowing his unwavering principles. I understood he'd likely spend the rest of his life tormented by self-reproach and disgust for having allowed my escape. In the end, I couldn't bear to tarnish his impeccable reputation with my own flaws. After much hesitation, I finally gathered the scattered coins I'd painstakingly saved over a decade, just 12 cents, and mailed the only possession I owned, a jade pendant said to be found on me when I was abandoned, to my aunt stationed with the military on a distant island. I wonder if Auntie will think of me sometimes when she sees that pendant. Later, I stepped in front of a speeding jeep. The endless grind of backbreaking labor, from dawn till dusk, is finally behind me. I no longer carry the weight of my adoptive father's expectations, striving to live up to his hopes and repay his kindness. At this moment, I'm finally living for myself. Bang, brains splattered everywhere. Perhaps this is the sound of flowers blooming. In the last second before my eyes closed, I saw a panicked, well-dressed young man hurriedly getting out of the jeep. His hands trembled as he held me, tears streaming down his face. I didn't understand. Before I could even voice the inexplicable sense of grievance and bitterness rising in my heart, my consciousness plunged into complete darkness. To my astonishment, when I opened my eyes again, I had traveled back in time and my aunt's voice was right beside me. She hadn't yet left to join the army. Realizing I hadn't made any mistakes at this point and that I would soon see my aunt, I struggled to open my eyes, only to hear my adoptive father speak. His voice was muffled and agitated. Don't act like you're some saint. If you really cared, why did you dump her with our mother under my name right after she was born? You've disowned her. Who are you to tell me how to raise her? Her father Thomas is that spoiled young master from a wealthy family who needs servants waiting on him hand and foot. She carries Thomas's blood in her veins. If I don't raise him right and he turns out badly, how could I ever face the uniform I once wore? My head was buzzing, and I couldn't quite grasp what they meant. Aunt, who did you give birth to? What do you mean? Her dad. The younger aunt was furious. Oh sure, you're so capable, so morally superior. If you're so righteous, why did you take money from her father? Her father sends you a couple hundred every month, and you never send it back, and with just that, you're letting her struggle like this too. If anything happens to her, just wait and see if that lunatic Thomas won't throw away everything he's worked for and come here to kill you. The foster father grunted, still muttering under his breath in discontent. Nothing's happened yet, and she's already seen a doctor, hasn't she? She was the one who insisted on learning from me and contributing to everyone. If she rushed into it too eagerly, how is that my fault? I had already stopped listening to whatever they said after that. Eating steamed corn buns and pickles every day wasn't because that's all we had at home. It was because that's all I deserved. I'm always grateful to my adoptive father who raised me. Despite the hardships, every month, someone would send him 100 or 200 yuan. The aunt I'd been wanting to repay for occasionally sending me used clothes turned out to be my birth mother, the one who should have raised me all along. I don't know when I woke from unconsciousness, but I found myself staring at the spiderwebbed roof beams, their earlier words torturously echoing through my mind again and again. After what felt like an eternity, my eyes shifted. I unconsciously wiped away tears I hadn't realized had fallen, then silently climbed off the con. The house and courtyard had fallen completely silent by then. They must have all left for work in the fields. I stepped out and turned toward the main hall, then used a wire to pick the lock on my adoptive father's door. Since we weren't related by blood and had to maintain proper boundaries, I'd never once set foot in his room my entire life. Inside stood Brand. New furniture, a massive wardrobe, an ornate square table, a long altar table, thick cotton quilts lay piled on the bed, while a radio and wristwatch sat casually atop the rosewood cabinet by the headboard. I stood there frozen, but what rose in my mind were the stiff, patched-up blankets I'd slept under since childhood, the rickety table and chairs in my room, so old they carried the faint scent of mildew. I pursed my lips and continued rummaging through the room. The heated bed cabinet was fully stocked with jerky, dried sweet potatoes, malted milk powder, peach cookies, and assorted biscuits. Hidden beneath the cabinet was a metal box containing a thick stack of cash and ration coupons. The bank passbook showed monthly deposits starting from my second birthday. It started at $1 million per month, then increased to $2 million, growing year by year until this year when it dropped to just $200 per month. My heart instantly turned ice cold. With trembling hands, I tucked the passbook and money orders into my pocket, found a backpack, and stuffed it with various food items before slinging it over my shoulder. Then, I doused the bedding, tables, and cabinets with kerosene, tossed the overturned radio and wristwatch into the kerosene-soaked bedding and clothes, lit a match and threw it on, before finally closing the door and walking away. In the village, the adults went to work and the children went to school, while those who didn't attend school were all on the hillside digging for wild vegetables. I managed to avoid everyone along the way and reached the commune, then took a bus to the county town. In the small park at the entrance of the Supply and Marketing Cooperative, I leaned over the bench with the paper and pen I had just bought, scribbling and sketching with the handful of Chinese characters and pinyin I had learned in the literacy class at the Educated Youth Settlement during my previous life. I slipped the money orders, passbook, and letter into an envelope and mailed it to the police station. Then, limping out of the city, I disappeared into the mountains without a backward glance. The clerk at the police station tore open the envelope while walking, sending money orders and passbooks fluttering down in a cascade. The commotion drew everyone in the office crowding around. What's going on? What happened? The bewildered crowd scrambled to pick up the scattered cash and ration coupons. Someone opened a passbook and gasped in astonishment at the astronomical sum printed inside. A thin letter was snatched from the pile, and someone began reading it aloud. Dear officers of the Public Security Bureau, I'm sorry for troubling you with my personal matters. I'm a 6-year-old child, and my adoptive father is a man of noble character and honorable military veteran. When he was discharged due to combat injuries, he gave up his job opportunity at the Armed Forces Department and donated all his veteran settlement funds to the families of his fallen comrades. After returning to farm life, he continued his spirit of service by helping neighbors and caring for the elderly and widowed. Day after day, we subsist on cornbread and pickles, barely eating our fill and living in hardship, yet helping others brings us joy. Our spirits are abundantly rich. At this point, everyone's expressions remained fairly relaxed, even showing a hint of admiration, but as their eyes fell upon those banknotes, they sensed something amiss. But today, I stumbled upon some deeply troubling news. My biological father, whom I've never met, has been relentlessly trying to corrupt him with money, month after month. For 5 solid years, I never knew my biological father, but being born from a man who could lavish large sums of money made even my existence seem like a sin in the eyes of my righteous adoptive father. The backbreaking labor he assigned me, weeding, digging, watering, gathering and chopping firewood, could never truly atone for my original sin. An older public security officer was reading the letter aloud, his voice gradually fading as the listeners exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions growing increasingly peculiar. Someone with a quick temper snatched the letter and continued reading. 3. Please return the cash and bank book in this envelope to my biological father. We don't want his money, and there's no need for him to send any more in the future. More people joined the conversation, as if they could visualize an innocent, wide-eyed child speaking with quiet sincerity. There's no need for you gentlemen to keep looking for me either. Though my adoptive father is kind enough to care for me, I can't bear to stand before such an honorable man being who I am. It would torment my conscience every single moment. Now grown into a sturdy youth who can weed fields and till the land, I've learned to provide for myself. Should misfortune befall me, consider it repayment for the wrongs I've committed in this lifetime. This world holds too much sorrow, but I have walked its paths. The final words faded to a near whisper. Everyone froze for a split second before snapping back to reality. Is this some kind of joke? Whether it is or not, when was this letter sent? Go find him now. If this is true, we might still have time. He's only 6 years old. Where could he possibly go on his own? A whole crowd of people had already gathered and was rushing out. At 6 years old, his adoptive father left the military and gave up his job and resettlement allowance. The deputy director, who had come to investigate the commotion, caught the keywords and his face turned pale. Quick, find him, now, he shouted while rushing to make a phone call. Hello, get me Captain G, hurry. The police station in the county town was in complete chaos, though I remained completely unaware of it. I had no idea how long I'd been walking through the mountains when my ankle finally gave out. I set down my basket and sat on a rock by the stream. The view from this spot was magnificent. Gazing into the distance, I could just make out a plume of black smoke rising from a village somewhere, as if all the things that never should have existed were scattering and vanishing with the wind. A slight smile touched my eyes as my gaze returned to the endless stretch of mountains. Young and penniless, I had to scrape by however I could. The bountiful autumn mountains seemed the perfect place to eke out a living, but before I could find an abandoned hunter's cabin or cave to take shelter, my head grew heavy and my vision darkened, whether from my earlier unconsciousness or all the rushing about, I'll never know, and I collapsed. I didn't know if I would wake up again, nor did I know if I even wanted to. In that moment of falling, I realized my heart was even calmer than when I had resolutely faced death in my past life. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself settled in a makeshift nest of straw, with my woven basket right beside me. I took a quiet look around. The space was quite large, divided by some worn-out wooden planks. The area where I was staying showed signs of habitation, with an old, rickety table and chairs nearby, much like the ones in my former dilapidated home, scattered with a few everyday items. In the makeshift straw bed next to mine, the bedding was worn but complete. In the partitioned outer area, dim light filtering through a small vent window revealed wooden stakes driven along the walls and leftover fodder scattered on the ground. This must be some sort of livestock shed. At the sound of approaching footsteps, I looked up to see an elderly man stepping inside, clutching a handful of unfamiliar plants. "Oh, you're awake." He rummaged through the shack and pulled out a stone mortar, the kind used for crushing garlic. He ground up the herbs, tossed in some unknown powder, mixed it all together, and only then did he approach me. I stayed perfectly still, watching as he cracked my ankle with a series of pops, then slathered on the poultice he'd just prepared. He let out a low chuckle. "I say, little one, can't you feel the pain? Injured like this? How far have you been walking again? Lucky for you, you ran into this old man, huh?" It seemed like he hadn't spoken to anyone in a long time, and now he had so much to say that he couldn't stop. He kept muttering to himself with belated realization, then scrutinized me carefully, checking my pulse one moment, lifting my eyelids the next. Seeing I remained unmoved, he frowned and mumbled under his breath, "There's nothing seriously wrong here, is there? Your mind and throat seem perfectly fine." His eyes swept over the basket filled with rare items and the hoe inflicted wound on my ankle, and he felt he'd pieced together the truth. He sighed. "You'll understand when you're older, even fingers aren't equal in length. It's natural for families to have favorites. Some connections last only a lifetime. Take care of yourself first. Your own well-being matters most. Look at me, an old man with one foot in the grave, working my fingers to the bone, doing the same work as everyone else, yet only getting half the pay. Don't you think that's way worse off than a young thing like you who still has someone to take care of her? Feeling a bit better now, aren't you?" I just watched him quietly the whole time, too drained to say a word. "For you're driving me crazy." He waved his hand dismissively and walked away, watching his fuming retreat. A flicker of playful mischief crossed my gaze. Does he think I'm some runaway child throwing a tantrum over family favoritism towards sons? I'm starting to get a vague idea of where I am now. The abandoned horse ranch built in the valley by the neighboring village, after being collectivized, it was repurposed as a cattle shed where the village kept their oxen and mules. I'd heard in my past life that there was an exceptionally skilled doctor living around here, known to everyone as Old Man Arthur. They say his family were major landowners before the founding of the People's Republic. He studied medicine with remarkable talent, and his skills were far above average. Even after he started raising cattle and mules here, people still came to him for medical consultations, paying with grains, eggs, or meat. He never really had it rough living here these days. Who doesn't get sick once in a while? With him around, all the neighboring villages benefited. No one would ever give him a hard time back then. Some folks took pity on my lame leg from such a young age and secretly urged me to come see him for a consultation, saying there might still be hope for a cure, but I couldn't afford the medical fees, and knowing my foster father's uncompromising nature, I didn't want to put him in an awkward position, so I never brought it up. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine he'd be the one to take me in. Old Man Arthur is truly kind-hearted. He always sets aside a bowl for me when cooking, changes my dressings right on schedule, and patiently gives instructions even when he knows I might not respond. That leg of yours needs to stay off the ground for the next couple days. Don't take this lightly, you're still so young. If you end up with a limp, people will never let you hear the end of it. He was just trying to scare me with those words, though he wasn't sure if I was even taking it in. After all, I was lying there perfectly still, completely unresponsive to everything. I never expected I'd actually glance over instinctively. He cracked a smile, the tension visibly easing from his expression. "At least you still care." About something. I was momentarily speechless. Just because I don't feel like talking doesn't mean I'm stupid. I'll have to fend for myself from now on. So staying in one piece would obviously be ideal, but I still couldn't be bothered to respond. Since I couldn't move for the time being, I just stayed put where I was. My mind went blank, and I could stare at the shifting light patterns coming through the window for what felt like ages. That day, a gaunt figure drifted toward the doorstep where only old Arthur stood, moving like a soul adrift silhouetted against the light. His features remained unclear to me, yet the aura of suffocating despair clinging to him, teetering on the edge of collapse. I could sense it clearly even through the window, from afar. "Excuse me," he spoke. My gaze flickered, but only for an instant. Thud, the sound of a body hitting the ground. Old man Arthur's grumbling voice carried in from outside. Well, another fool with a death wish if you're gonna die. "Don't do it on this old man's doorstep," muttering under his breath. He dragged the person in with considerable effort and dumped them beside me. After hastily administering a few acupuncture needles, he spotted me and started yelling, "Pass that water over here." Oh, I handed over the mostly full bowl of water resting on the stone block beside me. Old Arthur applied pressure to the acupoint, and only after he managed to get it down did he finally breathe a sigh of relief. Old Arthur was absolutely furious. One after another, this one actually starved himself into such a state, refusing both food and water. Finding food might be difficult, but water, where can't you find a drop of water? Clearly, you brought this on yourself. I had settled back into my spot, watching with curiosity. The man had a slender build, with his head tilted. His full head of silver-white hair stood out starkly in the dimly lit shed. My eyes blinked with discomfort, inexplicably welling up with a stinging urge to cry. How absurd. I turned over and buried my face in the soft, fragrant straw, my tears now flowing uncontrollably. In the time that followed, sometimes I'd steal a glance at my roommate next door. From my angle, I could only see the back of his head. He lay there completely still, looking more at peace than I ever was, at least when old man Arthur brought over that mush. I couldn't bear to waste the food placed before me and would always finish it, along with some personal matters. I still dragged myself out occasionally, as for him, except for those rare, unconscious moments when he'd carefully touch the pocket closest to his heart, he remained still, neither eating nor drinking. Old man Arthur couldn't stand watching, so he'd force some porridge or water into him, and he didn't seem to put up much resistance. Life just hung in the balance like that, and so another 2 days passed. That morning, figuring my foot was well enough to walk on, I crawled out of the hay pile. Following the sound, I made my way over to old man Arthur, who was chopping fodder by the stone trough outside, and started helping him feed the grass under the cutter. Old man Arthur let out a hearty whoa-ho. "Well done, you're finally getting the hang of it. Hey, you even know how to help an old man out." I remained silent and continued working without pause. Old Arthur didn't care whether I responded or not, effortlessly giving directions. "There's water over there. Look at you, haven't washed in days. You're filthy. Go clean yourself up. Breakfast is on the stove. Half is for you, and take the other half to that lordling inside." Everyone's a lord around here, expecting this old man to wait on them hand and foot. I gathered the scattered hay closer to old man Arthur before turning to fetch water from the chipped edge vat to wash up, then went to the earthen stove to get some food. I estimated the amount in the pot and set aside half. It was about half a bowl of porridge, a fist-sized sweet potato, and an egg, which I carried back to our quarters. My roommate, who'd been sharing the space for 2 days, seemed to have finally regained some strength. The man who was at death's door could now prop himself up against the brick wall. His eyes were closed then, and for the first time, I truly looked at his face. The moment I saw his face clearly, I froze in place. It's him, the one who drives the jeep. The food in his hands fell to the ground, bowl and all. The mush splattered everywhere with a loud thud, and flying shards hit him in the face, leaving a cut before scattering nearby. The person who had been keeping their eyes shut finally opened them. His gaze, flat and lifeless, swept over without a trace of emotion. In the next instant, his pupils contracted sharply. Before I could even process what was happening, he was already on one knee beside me, his hands gripping my slender shoulders as his gaze swept over me with an almost greedy intensity, as if unwilling to miss a single inch. His lips parted, then hesitated for a moment as if he were struggling to find his voice. "Thank goodness, are you all right?" His voice was hoarse, perhaps from days of silence, and it trembled slightly. Before I could react, his next words followed immediately. "Are you hurt anywhere? Are you feeling unwell?" I watched him quietly without responding. Though my eyes held confusion, he finally calmed down a bit, his outstretched hand hesitating midair before he pulled it back with restraint. While gathering the sweet potatoes and eggs that had rolled on the ground, he gently nudged my back to steer me away from the mess. Only then did he stand up, making an effort to soften his voice as he asked me, "Did you bring this food for me? Have you eaten anything yourself?" I hadn't said a word when old Arthur, hearing the commotion, came rushing over in a fluster. "Hey now, if you don't want to eat then don't eat." Why is a grown adult losing their temper at a little child? But before he could finish speaking, he took in the scene before him and fell silent, the silver-haired young man Looked toward old Arthur, a gentle smile gracing his gaunt, pale yet strikingly refined features. "Thank you for your kindness. I'm sorry to have troubled you. It was my fault for startling the child earlier." His voice had now returned to its normal tone, clear, smooth, and pleasant to the ear of old Arthur. Wore a bewildered expression as he studied the young man with peculiar intensity. "Well now, what's the special occasion today?" "You're all coming out of the woodwork. The little one actually ventured out, and this one here, even miracle medicine doesn't work this fast. If not for his earlier half-dead appearance that couldn't possibly be faked, the old man might have thought the young man was just pulling his leg, but in the next moment, he noticed the white-haired youth's gaze, though visibly restrained, still lingering covertly on the little child, unable to tear away, and he fell into thought, ignoring them. I walked back to the stove, scooped out the porridge, took an egg and a sweet potato, and stood there eating. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. Life boils down to just food and clothing, for now. I don't seem to need to rush finding a cave or cabin. Old man Arthur probably won't kick me out anytime soon, and I can make do with my clothes for the time being. As for food, the things I couldn't bear to burn and brought with me in the basket are all still there. After a brief pause, a plan had already formed in my mind. After finishing breakfast, I washed the bowls and cleaned the stove, then swept the floor around the cooking area. Returning to the shed, I rummaged through my backpack and pulled out my most valuable possession, an unopened tin of malted milk powder, and handed it to old man Arthur, gesturing toward my leg, indicating it was to thank him. Old man Arthur let out a surprised "Oh, I really shouldn't," but his actions spoke louder than words. He snatched it up without hesitation and held on tight. "These things are hard to come by. I've been stuck here for 6 or 7 years now. The last time I caught a whiff of this was over 2 years ago, brought by someone who came seeking medical treatment." I stopped looking at him, shouldered my basket, roughly got my bearings, and headed off in the direction away from the old village. "7, where are you off to, kid?" Old man Arthur called out, and the white-haired young man from earlier started following right behind me. I paused briefly but ignored them, walking straight into the village and knocking on the door of the finest blue brick house with tiled roof I could find. "Who is it?" The door was opened by a young woman holding a child, with an air of scholarly refinement about her. Too lazy to speak, I took out paper and pen and wrote 3 words, "Trade for grain." Then, he set down the basket to show her. The young woman's face lit up with delight at the sight of its contents. Malted milk powder, jerky. "I'll take all of these." Malted milk powder was a rare delicacy. Even half a jar would have people clamoring for it. I kept my eyes on her, signaling for her to make an offer. The young woman glanced at the paper, then at me, and then at the pale, gaunt, white-haired young man who had been silently following me the whole time. I don't know what scenario she imagined, but her face filled with sympathy. "Looking to trade for grain, are you? Coarse grains or fine grains?" "We don't have much fine grain to spare, but coarse grain isn't a problem, and these dried sweet potato strips of yours, aren't they food too? Why would you need to trade with me for more?" I suppose it's because I'm subconsciously resistant to it, but the memory of hunger haunted me, and I couldn't bear to waste food. After much deliberation, I had no choice but to trade it away. That way, I could pretend it had nothing to do with the past. The young woman pieced things together through guesswork and eventually struck a deal with me. I traded a whole basket of dried meat, sweet potato strips, malted milk powder, walnut cookies, biscuits, and candies for a patched-up set of old clothes that fit me, along with 2 jean of wheat flour, 2 jean of millet, 5 jean of cornmeal, and 50 jean of sweet potatoes. The white-haired young man took the initiative to carry the grain. I was on edge the whole time, terrified he'd snatch the provisions and run. It wasn't until we returned and he placed the grain beside my straw bed that the anxiety I'd carried all the way finally eased. Then, I found myself feeling conflicted again. In the end, I picked out a fist-sized sweet potato and handed it to him. The white-haired young man paused for a moment, then his eyes crinkled as he broke into a smile. "Is this my reward?" His smile caught me off guard, and I instinctively averted my gaze. Retreating back into my pile of straw, setting aside the question of my peculiar disposition, I began taking stock of my provisions. With my modest appetite, these meager supplies would barely last me 3 months at most, but this region's bitter cold brings 6 months of frost and snow, and with autumn just setting in, these rations would never see me through the winter. That realization drew my gaze toward the mountains. At noon, I brought a fist-sized sweet potato to help old man Arthur with the fire, burying the potato in the hearth. By the time his meal was ready, my sweet potato had steamed to perfection. I fished out the sweet potato, wiped down the sooty stove, then tucked the potato away, hoisted the empty basket, and headed into the mountains. "Hey, aren't you going to eat?" Just after serving the rice, old man Arthur watched the little kid voluntarily cleaning the stove, feeling more and more pleased, only to see the child head straight into the mountains without a backward glance. He instinctively turned to vent a few words to the young man, but then he saw the young man pull out a raw sweet potato from who knows where, wrap it carefully in a cloth like a treasure, tuck it into his pocket, and stride off after the little kid. Old man Arthur, my goal is crystal clear, find food, I'll forage for wild greens and mushrooms, gather chestnuts, hazelnuts, walnuts, any wild fruits really. I'm not picky luckily, it's harvest season now. Everyone's swamped with work, too busy to keep an eye on the mountain and forest resources, which gives me the perfect opening. I wandered along, pausing here and there, and gathered quite a bounty. As for the silver-haired youth, who went from keeping a discreet distance to brazenly walking right beside me, I don't get it, I don't understand it, and I don't want to get it or even try to. I kept collecting things, and every time I headed back with a full load, the young man would step up and take my basket from me. Then he started pushing his luck. He ended up carrying the basket the whole time. Every time we returned, when I saw him smiling at me with those crescent eyes, I'd foolishly feel compelled to give him a handful of wild greens or some foraged fruit as payment day after day after day. Finally, I'd had enough. When heading out again, I snatched the unused bamboo basket from old man Arthur and shoved it into the young man's arms. If you want something, go forage in the mountains yourself. Why should you get a share of what's mine? Do you think digging these up doesn't wear me out? The young man was taken aback for a moment, then broke into a smile as he looked at the girl's flushed, animated face. That made me even angrier. I turned and plunged into the mountains, but couldn't help pricking up my ears. It wasn't until I heard the familiar rustling sound of someone stepping on leaves behind me that I realized, without even noticing it myself, I had let out a sigh of relief. Feeling at ease, I chose a direction into the mountains that I'd never taken before. To my astonishment, my luck was incredible this time. I actually came across a chestnut tree with its bark split open. My heart leapt with joy for a split second, only to be instantly replaced by a sinking realization. I turned my head stiffly, glancing at the enormous basket carried by the young man who had caught up, then lowered the child-sized one I'd been carrying. The size difference was downright pitiful. I pressed my lips together, pressed them again, and then pressed them once more. Eventually, I quietly began using my pathfinding stick to sift through the fallen spiky burrs on the ground, picking out the chestnuts and placing them into my basket. Right. Just the chestnuts, not the prickly husks. This way, I could definitely fit more in. I felt a little pleased with myself for coming up with such a clever idea, only to notice that the young man had chosen to do exactly the same thing. And he's way faster than I am. His hands were fair and slender, yet he shelled chestnuts as if impervious to the prickly husks, filling the basket at an astonishing rate. So frustrating. On the bright side, the young man probably thought he got the better end of the deal. Every now and then, he'd toss another handful into my basket. I only gathered what had fallen on the ground, but with his contributions, my basket filled up almost as fast as his. In the end, I didn't feel so shortchanged anymore. On the way back, he carried the large basket on his back and effortlessly took the smaller one from me, the one I was about to struggle lifting, and carried it in his hand. I paused for a moment. Is this meant to compensate me? You don't expect me to pay anything in return, do you? To my surprise, when we returned to the shed, he actually poured all the chestnuts from the large and small baskets right into my grain storage area. I stared at him wide-eyed. He gave me that familiar crinkle-eyed smile, his expression tinged with anticipation. Hesitantly, I scooped up an overflowing handful of chestnuts and offered them to him. His face lit up as he accepted them, turning to store the nuts by his makeshift straw shelter next door. I blinked, glancing between the massive pile of chestnuts beside me and the young man, when it struck me, he was actually growing on me. My conscience is still pricking me a bit. After all, when old man Arthur was cooking, I had brought along an extra portion for the young man this time. The white-haired youth held the extra meal I gave him with a solemn and cherishing expression, as if cradling some precious treasure. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I averted my face. It's a bit strange, and I'm a little curious, but never mind. I'd better not dwell on it. From that day on, the way we interacted changed again. We each carried a basket into the mountains, and whatever we brought back, I'd give him a small share as payment. The rest was all mine. The only thing was, I also ended up being responsible for one of his meals every day. I can't tell if this is a loss or a gain. Grown-ups eat so much. How much more food do I need to stockpile just to get him through the winter? But he's such a hard worker. If he starves to death, where am I supposed to find someone this useful next year? The thought struck me, and I froze right where I stood. It hasn't been long since I left my adoptive father, yet here I am already thinking about exploiting others. As expected, his earlier preparing for rainy days wasn't without reason after all. I paused for a moment, blinking away the moisture gathering in my eyes, then quickly brushed it aside. Whatever, fine then, I'll just prepare his share of rations too. As for the past, it has nothing to do with me anymore. At this thought, my expression softened a little. Lost in thought with a furrowed brow, I didn't notice someone stealing glances at me while my eyes were downcast. His gaze couldn't hide his concern as my expression shifted, and he only breathed a sigh of relief when my features relaxed. Oblivious to it all, I closed my eyes while planning out tomorrow's route. Soon after, a medicinal pouch was tossed into the nearby campfire. The scent of medicinal herbs permeated the enclosed space, lulling my sleeping form into an even deeper slumber. Only then did the young man dare to approach. Just as he had on previous nights, he carefully sat beside me, tenderly tracing the delicate features of my face that still bore some resemblance to his own. Memories of these past days flickered through his mind. He recalled how I'd eagerly gathered supplies, my slightly greedy desire to claim everything for myself warring with soft-hearted concern that he might go hungry. Old Arthur had been watching for days, fuming with impatience until he finally couldn't hold back, couldn't find her. Could you? That's how you ended up in this state. The silver-haired young man's gaze softened, his expression unusually gentle as he gave a quiet hum of acknowledgement. Hey, old man, thought your sweetheart was gone for good. You youngsters are always so caught up in romance. He remembered reading in those old storybooks about people going grey overnight after losing their beloved. Looks like he just witnessed it firsthand. Little did he know, this beloved wasn't quite what he had in mind. Old man Arthur clicked his tongue twice, intrigued. You don't look like someone who can't afford a decent meal. That very night after waking up, he pulled out a thick wad of banknotes for him 9. But this little one is so malnourished and frail. He had barely spoken when he saw the young man's face in the firelight. Cold and murderous, old Arthur coughed and wisely shut his mouth, but the young man spoke up. I didn't know when she was born. Old man Arthur, what the hell, right after the war ended that year, I was passing through this area and remembered my old wet nurse's hometown was nearby, so I decided to drop by for a visit. The old man's eyes lit up instantly. I think I get it now, judging by this child's age. It's hard to say whether liberation had even happened back then. What kind of wealthy family could afford to hire a wet nurse in those days? They were definitely set up. This young man, with his temperament, didn't seem like the type to bend to others' whims. It wasn't until a year after I left that my grandmother learned of her existence through a letter from the wet nurse. I was abroad at the time, having been deployed to the Eastern Front. My grandmother was too elderly, and she was too young to endure the hardships of travel. After weighing the options, my grandmother sent some money to the wet nurse, asking her to take good care of the child until my return later. The political situation shifted. Having lived a sheltered life, my grandmother couldn't withstand the sudden upheaval at home and passed away. Our connection was severed for several months. By the time I finally returned, she had already been adopted by a foster father of old man Arthur. Well, this is hard to say. Back then, she had grown quite attached to her wet nurse, who had taken excellent care of her, delicate, fair-skinned, and utterly adorable. I have a job, even if I take her back. I'd have to leave her at home with a caretaker. Old man Arthur nodded in understanding. Under those circumstances, it would be better to leave the child here temporarily. Once she's a bit older, it would be safer to bring her home. That's exactly what the young man had in mind. In the end, he didn't take the person with him, leaving only a jade pendant that served as proof of the Thomas family identity. From then on, he sent money and care packages every single month. He was genuinely swamped with work. Sometimes it was unclear whether he was even in the country. After the founding of the People's Republic, it wasn't easy for scholars and experts who had studied abroad to return home and contribute. His background was unusual. Though the Thomas family was gone, his former friends and acquaintances were spread all over the world, and many of them were thriving. Upon his return, he was assigned to his current department specifically for this work. When he gets busy, he really can't focus on anything else. All he could do was send money and care packages. There was nothing more within his power. The nanny's passing caught him off guard, but he knew Andrew well. This childhood friend had always valued his reputation. He might not be the most attentive person, but he would never do anything to tarnish his good name. In his letters, Andrew kept urging him to serve the country with dedication, assuring him that Annie would be well cared for. Enclosed with the letter was a photograph. The girl wore simple clothes like everyone else, having grown taller and thinner, but her face was lit up with a big smile. Her radiant expression made it clear she was adjusting well, so he continued sending money. He figured he'd wait a few months, finish up his current workload, then take some leave to come back and check on things. If possible, he'd switch to a less demanding position by then, so he could just bring them home and keep them close. But he never expected. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The young man gently stroked the child's sleeping face, his expression filled with both tenderness and remorse. Old Arthur let out a sigh. That explains it. There's nothing wrong with her vocal cords. She must have gotten stuck in her own head after some incident, which is why she refuses to speak. Spend more time with her from now on. She's still young. She'll come around eventually. Or maybe just let go of the past. The young man's eyes dimmed, shadowed with pain. Annie, is my background really so hard for you to accept? The letter surfaced in his mind once again. All that nonsense Andrew drilled into him, being born with original sin, having to toil for redemption, how money corrupts. Old man Arthur had no idea what was going through his mind, yet couldn't help feeling curious. Since you've tracked me down, when were you planning to acknowledge our connection? The young man's expression faltered momentarily. He couldn't resist touching the still warm face beneath his hand again. Just a little longer. Annie was starting to warm up to him. By now, wait until time fades the old memories and shifts their perspectives a bit, recalling the despair of searching everywhere for someone in vain those past few days. He had all the patience in the world to wait any possible contingency. He simply couldn't bear it. Old man Arthur didn't get it, but that didn't matter. With 2 more people around, he was no longer alone in these mountains, talking only to the ox and the mule. And that made him genuinely happy, seeing that they planned to stay. Long term, he started sharing his experience. It gets cold around here. In winter, heavy snow can seal off the mountain pass, so forget about coming or going. You'd better start preparing early. The little girl keeps hauling food into the den, but she doesn't even have winter clothes. Forget winter wear. She only has 1 set of clothes to change into. Thomas nodded in agreement. He'd been thinking the same thing. When this stable was first built, only premium materials were used, but years of neglect have taken their toll, and sleeping in haylofts through winter simply won't do. 10. Yet asking his daughter to relocate elsewhere might scare her off. That's what worried him. He really needs to think this through. I was completely unaware of what happened that night, and life carried on as usual in the days that followed, as fieldwork was nearly finished and more people started heading into the mountains. It took me longer to fill my basket each time, with enough grain stored in the shed to last me until spring. I turned my attention to gathering firewood. The white-haired youth seemed either driven by sheer boredom or searching for something in the mountains. Whenever I ventured into the hills, he would inevitably trail along. On lucky days, he'd even manage to snare a hare or pheasant or 2. Every time he stewed game, he'd share half a bowl each with old Arthur and me, knowing it was hush money to keep me quiet. I ate with a clear conscience. In my past life, I went over a decade without tasting a single bite of meat. This time around, I'm only 6 years old and I've already managed to get my hands on meat. With a full belly at every meal, I'm quite content with my current life. In fact, I even began to nurture some aspirations. I wanted to have enough to eat, and ideally, on top of that, be able to have some meat. Having set this goal for myself, I started observing the abandoned traps I came across in the mountains and tried to replicate them. The white-haired young man seemed to sense my intentions and would occasionally offer a few words of guidance at crucial moments, and just like that, my traps started yielding results. Our dinner table wasn't exactly laden with lavish feasts, but we began having meat dishes every few days. Life suddenly felt full of promise. That morning, as dawn was breaking and I was still half asleep, I heard a gruff, angry shout outside the door. "Thomas, say that one more time. What the hell do you think you're doing?" The voice was accompanied by a loud thud. It was the sound of a hand slamming hard against wood. The whole world seemed to shake with the impact, but what caught my attention more was the name he called out. Then I heard that clear, pleasant male voice again, the one that had been constantly in my ear these past few days. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, take it easy there. Come on, let's talk in the car." In the car, my baby is still asleep. The voices faded into the distance, and I could no longer make out the last few words. "So this is Thomas." My mind went completely blank, and I just lost the ability to think. In that moment, my mind was racing with thoughts, yet it felt like I wasn't thinking at all. My mind kept flashing between 2 images, one from our past life, where he held me sobbing in front of the Jeep, and the other of all his bright-eyed smiles these past few days. But soon, both were overwhelmed by memories of those 16 arduous years, rising at dawn and toiling till dusk in humble perseverance. I forced a stiff smile and curled myself into a tight ball. He's Thomas, after all, the same Thomas who never wanted me, not in our past life, nor in this one. All the warmth of this period is gradually being tinged with frost. Meanwhile, inside the Jeep, Thomas cut off the old leader before he could launch into his lecture. "Uncle, tell me, what else could I have done besides stepping down?" His hands trembled as he pulled out the letter to show him, his emotions spiraling out of control. "I've been following our troops around since I was 14 for 15 years, through hails of bullets, raging infernos, and enemy lines. When have I ever said no? Now the world is at peace, a golden age of prosperity and order. After serving my country with unwavering loyalty, is it too much to ask to just live out my days watching over my daughter? My little girl is 6 years old now. She's the absolute jewel of our Thomas family, but damn it, she hasn't known a single day of peace and happiness in her life." 11. Who the hell do you think I'm fighting out here for? Tell me, who am I doing this for? Thomas raised a hand to cover his reddened eyes. After composing himself slightly, he continued, "I'm sorry, she's only 6 years old. She still refuses to speak a word. She almost gave up on life." The senior leader fell silent, his gaze fixed on the line. "This world is too harsh. She has already been here." Thomas said no more and took back the thin letter. He quietly opened the car door and got out. Seeing his friend and colleague waiting by the car with a complicated expression, he patted him on the shoulder. "Thanks, did you bring the stuff?" Without another word, the other person popped the trunk and started unloading several thick quilts, a few military-style coats, some miscellaneous items in a basket, and 2 sacks of grain. Thomas quickly composed himself and directed the team to carry everything back. He first glanced at his daughter, who was still fast asleep with her eyes closed, and his expression softened even more. The Jeep came and went in a flash. Old man Arthur had been quiet as a mouse the whole time, and only now did he cautiously ask Thomas, "What do you do for a living, and why was that guy so full of fire and brimstone just now?" Thomas ignored him. Old Arthur, well versed in self-preservation, wisely kept his mouth shut. Thomas tossed a notebook over to him instead. "Figured you might need this. Call it a thank you. Thank him for bringing his daughter back, for giving her a place to stay, and for getting her leg treated." Old man Arthur instantly understood what he meant. He waved his hand dismissively, saying it was really no big deal. "This little one is truly endearing. She always brought her own provisions for meals, and she'd take care of any chores within reach without being asked. When he saved her, didn't she repay him immediately with that offering?" But before he could utter a word, the moment old man Arthur recognized what he was holding, he clutched it tightly to his chest. "Heh, then this old man won't stand on ceremony." The medical notes of a renowned physician from the previous dynasty. "This is truly a remarkable find." I slept fitfully, my dreams already fading from memory by the time I opened my eyes to the morning light. The shadows in my heart seemed to have scattered along with the darkness. That's when I noticed my straw pallet had been transformed. Now it was made up with soft bedding. I was nestled in the bedding with an army coat draped over me, burying my face in its fuzzy collar. I gently nuzzled against the soft fabric. "Are you awake?" Thomas's mellow voice reached me. I instinctively rubbed my eyes. Thomas had been checking on her repeatedly, his mind restless until he saw her response, which finally eased his worries a little. "Let's rest today. It's already mid-morning, and we won't get far if we head into the mountains now. We should fix up this place for winter." I nodded mechanically, then realized my mistake and burrowed deeper into my coat. Thomas chuckled softly, thinking I was just being shy. As if suddenly remembering something, he explained the reason for the unexpected additional items. "I've run into some trouble and have nowhere to stay for now. These things were brought over by a friend last night." The part about running into trouble was true. The letter sent to the police station containing money and vouchers had been seen by quite a few people, given that he'd been withdrawing similar amounts every month this year. An investigation was inevitable, but it's not that serious. Either his monthly allowance plus mission bonuses add up to about 200 or 300. And that's a fixed amount, but the process over there will take some time. During this period, he'll be suspended from duty, so he's decided to stay put right here. I blinked, still lost in thought. Long after the man had left to attend to other matters, my mind also drifted to the letter and money order I'd sent to the police station. Could those be what got him into trouble? 12. In his previous life, this man was still driving around in a car, full of ambition and vigor even 10 years later, but Now he's gone gray prematurely from worry, reduced to living in a thatched hut like the rest of us, eating wild herb porridge and sweet potatoes. I feel a pang of regret. If only I'd worded that letter more carefully, maybe I wouldn't have ruined his life. Honestly, aside from not acknowledging me as his own and coming from a humble background, there's really nothing wrong with him. Even though he didn't claim me, he still paid child support. My adoptive father was the one who didn't want me to be spoiled, so the money wasn't used on me. Huddled in my coat for a long while, I still felt that compared to how Thomas treated me, I owed him much more. I didn't know what to do, so I just pretended to be completely clueless. In the days that followed, I kept gathering supplies at the same pace as before. Thomas stuck by my side just like always. It almost felt like everything was still the same, but I could sense something had changed. I used to easily ignore his presence, but now I find myself standing taller, sometimes even feeling breathless with unease. When preparing extra meals for him, I'd unconsciously select the better portions, worrying incessantly about whether he was getting enough to eat or if the food suited his taste. Thomas, of course, couldn't have failed to notice how unlike myself I'd become. For all his clever schemes, he never guessed what truly mattered to me, nor realized I'd uncovered his identity just from a name. He mistook it for a sign of our growing closeness. Thomas has a knack for pushing his luck. He cut bamboo to make shelves, then organized my stockpiled food along with the supplies others had sent him, sorting everything by category on the racks. Our belongings ended up all mixed together. The shelves took up quite some space, so we moved our makeshift beds side by side. Later on, when I slept under my coat at night, he'd share half of his big quilt to cover me. When winter came, heavy snow sealed off the mountains, piling up waist-high at the entrance to the valley. We were holed up in the mountain hollow, waiting out the winter. Only when old man Arthur fed the cows and mules each day did we lend a hand, and suddenly our time felt abundant. Old man Arthur and Thomas, never once to stay idle, took up books to teach me how to read. It suddenly struck me, that letter I wrote to the police station, I'd forgotten that at this point, I shouldn't know how to read or write. In my previous life, I never had the chance to attend school. The only reason I learned to read was because our production brigade made us attend the literacy classes. I ended up studying there for a while. Fortunately, I have a good memory and could retain most of what was taught. That's how I managed to scribble out a letter, though with my limited literacy, it was peppered with pinyin scribbles and doodles, fitting enough for a little kid like me. My mind wandered for just a moment, and by the time I snapped back, the two had already clearly divided their Tasks. Old Arthur had his medical books, while Thomas rummaged around for ages in a parcel from his comrade and finally pulled out a criminal law book. I glanced at it a couple of times, and old Arthur gave a rather mischievous chuckle. They must be really worried you'd get into trouble, sending you this. Thomas could only sigh in resignation. Probably his friends found out about that incident where he stormed over to Andrew's place and nearly crossed the line. My traditional Chinese medicine and criminal law courses have started as scheduled. They give their talks at fixed times daily, and I listen whenever I feel like it. If I show interest with a lingering glance or an engaged expression, they'll elaborate more. If not, they don't push it. That's basically their approach. Old Arthur's traditional Chinese medicine lessons focus on everyday health and how to handle minor ailments. Thomas's criminal law course is more about what strategies to use in specific situations to fully protect yourself. He even taught me some self-defense moves in between. They said it was just a way to kill time. I'm not actually 6 years old. I know this is for my own good. Having never been treated kindly before, I found it quite unsettling. At first I pretended not to care much, but in reality I was awkwardly straining to listen. As it went on, I grew even more attentive. Even pulling out the paper and pens I'd bought earlier to take notes. That day, I suddenly heard a sentence: justifiable defense resulting in the death of an unlawful assailant does not constitute a crime. My pupils dilated, and before he could tell any accompanying anecdote, I shot up from my seat and rushed over to snatch the book. Thomas was clueless about what was happening, yet he let me proceed without resistance. The moment those words came clearly into view, my teeth began to chatter faintly. What's wrong? What happened? Thomas, who had been watching me closely, immediately asked with concern. I shook my head stiffly, though I had finally responded. Thomas found no joy in it. Afraid that pressing further would irritate me, he restrained himself and patiently recounted the cases he had in mind. I composed myself and listened intently, but it was precisely because I listened so carefully that I became certain. In my past life, I had indeed killed someone by accident, but it was in self-defense. I was innocent. My lips trembled, and tears started streaming down my face. Thomas was taken aback. Why, without a second thought, he scooped me onto his lap to comfort me. His comforting only made me feel more wronged. I bit my lower lip until it bled, my clenched fists driving my nails deep into my palms. Absurd. In my past life, this very thing cost me my life. In my past life, Thomas also, because of this, accidentally ran me over with his car and killed me. Uncle Arthur, Uncle Arthur. Thomas pinned me against his chest, prying my mouth open with one hand while forcing his own fingers between my teeth, his other hand clamping both of my wrists to keep me from hurting myself, all while shouting for old man Arthur, who was outside gathering hay. I turned and buried my face in his chest, surrendering to ragged, gasping sobs. How could we have been so blind? 13. How could I have been so foolish? I had actually delivered my own life right under my biological father's wheels. Old man Arthur was startled at the sight. He urged anxiously, "Let her cry it out. She can't keep holding it in. She needs to let it all out." Thomas had no clue what had really triggered my tears. He was racking his brain so hard that beads of sweat formed on his forehead. There, don't be scared, Dad. I mean, I'm right here. I'll always be here for you. Wah. I could no longer hold back and burst into loud sobs. Thomas was utterly heartbroken, but old Arthur completely killed the mood. Let it out. Just let it all out. You'll feel better after a good cry. But both Thomas and I acted as if he wasn't there. I kept on crying, and Thomas continued to comfort me with heartfelt concern. Thomas stayed patiently by my side the whole time, letting me vent freely. When I finally calmed down, he brought a damp cloth and gently wiped my face. I flinched uncomfortably and struggled to get down, but when I couldn't break free, I just gave up and let him do as he pleased. Noticing my embarrassment, he ruffled my hair. "Did I scare you? Don't worry. If you don't like it, I won't tell such stories anymore." That's not it at all, but I wasn't ready to speak yet, so I just raised my hand to cover his mouth. Thomas seemed pleasantly surprised by my sudden closeness, his expression softening instantly. All right, I won't say another word. We still have those hawthorns we stocked up on earlier. How about I make you some candied fruit skewers?" Candied fruit skewers? I've never tried that before. I looked up at him, my eyes conveying the message loud and clear. All right, approved. Thomas instantly broke into a smile. He never put me down, just carried me over to the storage shelves, where he rummaged for hawthorn berries. Then he pulled out some white sugar someone had given him and called out to old man Arthur to help wash the fruit. From lighting the fire to skewering the berries, even while simmering the sugar syrup, he kept holding me with one arm, never setting me down. I felt somewhat embarrassed, yet also strangely reluctant to be put down. When the candied hawthorn sticks were finally ready, the sweet tart fragrance seemed to permeate the air, making me forget everything else. Over the course of the winter, Thomas and I grew increasingly comfortable around each other. When he hugged me spontaneously, I stopped resisting and even became quite unfazed by it. He also made me all sorts of delicious treats: candied hawthorn berries, crystal sugar yam, sugar roasted chestnuts, rice cakes, jujube paste yum cakes, and sponge cakes. As the festive season approaches, We enjoy laba congee during the laba festival, followed by the New Year's Eve feast, then dumplings. On New Year's Day and sweet rice balls for the Lantern Festival. The winter days may be long, but I've been living them to the fullest. I've read the entire criminal law book cover to cover multiple times. With the turn of the year, the ice and snow begin to melt away. I'm not sure how Thomas managed the negotiations with the village, but with my tacit consent, I now renamed Gianni, was registered independently in this village. 14. The village even permitted him to claim a plot in this valley and build a courtyard house for me. Thomas explained that he had to maintain appearances by staying with Old Man Arthur, so the courtyard could only be constructed under my name. He asked me to reserve a room for him so he could sneak over at night for better meals. Considering the circumstances, he said this was already a privilege for him. I instinctively assumed his situation was similar to Old Man Arthur's. When the roads were closed in winter at Old Man Arthur's place, it was one thing, but the rest of the time, villagers were constantly coming and going with their oxen and mules, delivering fodder and hauling manure. Whether it was preparing decent meals or stockpiling grains and mountain provisions, everything was ultimately inconvenient. My sense of guilt toward him resurfaced, and I nodded without hesitation. All things considered, I'm the one who came out ahead in this situation. Once I settle in the village, I can take on work like cutting pig grass and cattle fodder. I'll also get my share of the grain ration distributed per capita, which means my livelihood will be secured. I'm not really a child. I can even forage for food in the mountains and woods. When the time comes, I'll be able to look out for him more. Thomas had fallen so low that he couldn't keep relying on his friend, who might show up at any time, or might not come at all, to get by. After moving into the new courtyard, before I could figure out how to live next, I noticed Thomas occasionally gazing toward the mouth of the valley with a restless look. I thought again of that friend of his who hadn't been seen in ages, and sighed with melancholy. When you're cooking, just give him extra portions to keep him full and distracted. Thomas, who had no clue what I was thinking, Annie loves me even more now. In the dim light of dawn, a jeep pulled up in front of the courtyard. Half asleep, I heard a middle-aged man trying to keep his voice down, but it still came out rough as he slammed the table and yelled, "Say that again, you little shit." Thomas frowned. "Keep it down." The senior official's expression tightened as he remembered someone was still sleeping inside. He was a military officer transitioning to civilian leadership, well aware of his battlefield-honed voice that could rival cannon fire. He stood up and moved away. Only after seeing Thomas follow did he lower his voice again. "Aren't you going? Do you think I'm asking for your opinion? This is an order. You haven't stepped down yet, so you'll do as I say." Thomas wasn't born yesterday. Staying put is the hard part. Stepping down would be a piece of cake. It's just that he just found his daughter and couldn't rest easy, so he kept putting it off. Then he heard the old boss's voice, full of frustration at his unfulfilled potential. "Others retire because they've served with honor, but their health forces them out, and you're a goddamn deserter. I won't allow such scum to come from under my command." Thomas bit back what he was about to say. The former leader knew Thomas well and suddenly remembered something. "Isn't this for your daughter's sake? Your daughter has such strong principles. If she ever finds out, she'll disown you." Thomas fell silent. "Let me think about this a bit more." His mind drifted back to that letter. What if he could stand before his daughter as the shining, exemplary father she deserved? The senior leader knew he had relented, and only then disclosed the specifics. "This matter truly hinges on you alone." During an operation before the new year, the opposition somehow got wind of it and prepared in advance. Our support team managed to desperately get a few experts onto the ship at the last moment, but they themselves didn't make it back. They're still being held in that lab in M country. Thomas understood what he meant. "We still don't know if those people are alive or dead. If we go through official channels in this situation, who knows how many of them would survive the ordeal? We'll have to go through special channels to get him out first and figure out the rest later." Thomas is undoubtedly the right person for this. He's from the Thomas family, though the family line has died out. Their old connections still hold considerable influence over there, and the Thomases have other networks of their own. Of course, it's not like he's absolutely irreplaceable. If we really want to get in touch, we can still reach some patriotic friends, but we already have Thomas, don't we? With that, Thomas turned and went back into the courtyard without giving a clear answer. I sat on the doorstep, chin in hand, staring unblinkingly at Thomas, who was clearly in a foul mood. I was still half asleep just now. I vaguely overheard something about taking Thomas somewhere and bolted out in a panic. Only when I saw them standing together and talking calmly, without him being taken away, could I finally settle down and wait. Thomas crouched down in front of me and wrapped his arms around me. I rarely let him handle me so compliantly. Thomas gave a gentle smile. "You're up so early. Oh dear, you're freezing. Surely you don't expect me to help you with your coat." I was instantly embarrassed. "No way." Thomas carried me into the room and helped me into a coat. He ruffled my hair, made me a cup of malted milk, then went all out by hand-rolling pure wheat noodles, topping them with a poached egg and sprinkling finely minced meat. I stayed quiet without a word. Thomas seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he remained silent, his gaze fixed on me as if unwilling to look away. I tried my best to act as if nothing was wrong. Finally, Thomas spoke again. I need to be away for a while. I kept my head down without looking up, but tears started falling uncontrollably. Thomas ended up leaving after all. 15. They say he went back to resolve some issues from his past. Once you come back, you can stay for good. Before leaving, he scraped together every last bit of cash and coupons from the old boss and the young driver, handing it all to me. He went on and on with instructions, and even made me promise not to get angry when he returned to tell me a big secret. A sudden, wild hope sprang up in my heart. Is it what I think it is? But I didn't dare ask. I just agreed to wait for him as he said, clinging to a hope I scarcely dared entertain. I kept my worries about him in check and lived my life as best I could. Now, I have a yard of my own. There were provisions Thomas had sent after his departure, neatly arranged clothes and shoes, and an oversized package filled with assorted candies, pastries, and chocolates, all handpicked by Thomas himself, or so I was told. I treasured them dearly. Only on nights when I missed him would I allow myself a small taste. The sweetness blooming in my mouth felt like having him right beside me again. I tried my best to make these last a little longer. Just like before, I still share meals every day with old Arthur, my neighbor next door, bringing my own food. I took Thomas's advice and stopped venturing deep into the mountains, but I did take on the village job of cutting pigweed to earn some work points. The season when the locust trees bloom, I remembered the old locust tree in the neighboring village, the one I had secretly discovered in my past life. If I don't go pick them this year, I'm afraid they'll all go to waste. My reluctance to let food go to waste won out, and I ended up going after all, both expected and unexpected. I saw my adoptive father Andrew again, though he had always carried himself with an upright posture and dressed in simple yet clean, presentable clothes in his past life, he still struggled to stand straight now. Only, the collar and cuffs of his worn-out clothes were grimy and dark. All along the way, he could hear people calling out greetings. Andrew, I'm heading to my in-laws' place first to pick up my wife. Can you finish up the rest of the work in the field for me? Andrew, there's one last patch in my vegetable garden that needs planting before it's too late. Can you come by tonight and help me turn the soil? Andrew, could you help me? As expected, my adoptive father agreed with a hearty chuckle. My gaze drifted to his limping gait, and I sighed with concern. Probably got hurt by a hoe, just like what happened to me. Well, being helpful and selflessly dedicated are good qualities, but without me around, why can't he learn to take proper care of himself and value his own health, though? My adoptive father has such a zero-tolerance personality compared to these minor setbacks in daily life. I'd rather not appear before him and subject him to constant mental torment. I changed my route to avoid her, only to run straight into my aunt heading out for work. In my past life, she had already left the army camp by this time, always glamorous. It was rare to see her looking so plain and austere. The proud and beautiful little cousin from my memories was now dragging a large basket, chasing after the older children. And my uncle, who should have been climbing the ladder of success, was covered in dust, shouldering a hoe. I was taken aback. This was his uncle visiting for family reunion, possibly. Aunt and the others have discovered my existence. Uncle looked puzzled. Who's that? Even fairer and prettier than our Jiao. My aunt glanced over and immediately shook her head. No idea. Never seen them before. Must be someone's relative from the city. I froze for a moment, instinctively lowering my head. My hands, once as scrawny as chicken claws, had become plump and fair with adorable dimples after just half a year of proper care. Honestly, this is just perfect. In my little cottage nestled in the neighboring village's valley, life continues its steady, predictable rhythm. I gather pigweed and wild greens, then sun-dry vegetables and mushrooms. Every day I team up with old man Arthur, and we also collect firewood along the way. Blossoms bloom and fade as the leaves begin to turn golden. It's harvest season in the mountains again. I'm thinking of heading into the hills too. Stock up on food. Last year's candied hawthorn berries and crystallized yam beans were delicious. I should learn to make them myself. My hopes for Thomas were tucked away in the deepest corner of my heart, too precious to disturb. One perfectly ordinary evening, a frantic pounding shook the courtyard gate. I'd been on edge for days, and now my anxiety surged even stronger. I scrambled up to answer the door, knocking over a chair and table in my haste. Several unfamiliar figures in police uniforms stood at the door. My face instantly went pale as I struggled to stay composed. 16. Has something happened to him, or are they here to have me claim his body? With his background, how could I have been so sure nothing would happen to him after he left? Frantic, I tried to speak, but no sound came out, my eyes instantly welling up with tears. Some comrades are here to take you to see him. Old man Arthur spoke up at that very moment, his expression grave. That's right, we'll take you to see him. The police officer didn't know much about the situation himself, and at just 6 or 7 years old, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to explain things clearly, so I simply stopped trying to explain, from a three-wheeler to a car, then switching to a train, and finally speeding along in a jeep. It felt like a relay race the whole way, with waves of people taking turns to escort me. Less than 3 hours had passed by the time I was delivered to a hospital room in the capital. At the hospital room door, a group of weary-looking, pale-faced young and middle-aged men with a scholarly air appeared anxious, interspersed with a few whose arms were slung in bandages. The middle-aged men in Zhongshan suits who had visited the courtyard, along with those standing ramrod straight around them, wore solemn expressions. Upon seeing me, the middle-aged man opened his mouth. This time, he wasn't originally on the list, but he insisted on adding himself. Sending him alone gives us the best chance of success while requiring the least amount of resources, manpower, and time. In the end, he could only sigh. The doctor said his condition is critical. He paused for a moment. He might not make it, but I know, even if it's the last time, he'd definitely want to see you. He was an outstanding comrade. He just wanted to make you proud of him. Please, don't blame him. My mind went completely blank, unable to process a single word, staggering forward. I pushed past the people blocking my way and burst into the hospital room. The person on the bed was entirely wrapped in blood. Soaked bandages, with no visible inch of unbroken skin. I wanted to hold him, but didn't dare touch him. I could only carefully grasp his uninjured hand and cover my own eyes with it. Someone tried to speak, but was stopped by others. Captain G only has tonight, unless he wakes up, but the doctors say there's almost no chance of that happening. After this, there won't be any after this, while he still has a breath left in him. The one he most wanted to hear and see was this little child. Before him, the hospital room was deathly still. The clock ticked away, each second echoing the ebbing of Thomas's life. It's been over a year since I last spoke. I thought I had forgotten how to speak, but in this moment, it all came back as if by instinct. Are you leaving me too? I murmured under my breath, tears already beyond my control. You're leaving me too. How could you? I wanted to call you Dad. I wanted us to be a family. How can you leave now? Wait for me. Let me go with you. Please, I'm losing control of my emotions. Why did you bring me into this world just to abandon me? You still haven't told me why. How could you leave me? You promised you'd come back for me. I broke down sobbing. Please wake up. Please, wake up. I don't want you to die. I'm scared, Dad. I'm frightened. Don't leave me all alone. Please don't leave me by myself. Okay, it felt like an eternity had passed, yet also like only a fleeting moment. All right, soft and low, almost like a whisper. I looked up through tear blurred eyes. The figure lying silently in the hospital bed had opened their eyes at some unnoticed moment, though his body remained immobile. His gaze held a gentle softness. He curved his brows and eyes into that familiar pleasant shape, straining to lift the corners of his mouth. Speaking required effort, yet he articulated each word with deliberate clarity. There now, be good, don't cry. He paused for a moment, then continued, don't be scared. Daddy's home. From now on, Daddy will always be here with Annie. No need to be afraid. I stared at him in a daze. The onlookers, who had been unable to bear watching this heart-wrenching farewell, suddenly snapped back to attention. Doctor, quick, he's awake, he's waking up. I was quickly pushed to the corner. Thomas let the doctors do their work, but his gaze remained fixed on me. I felt uncharacteristically embarrassed and scrubbed my face with my hands. I thought, Thomas was discharged over a month later. During that time, his life was in jeopardy twice more, but he pulled through with sheer determination. I ended up staying in the hospital room. He couldn't bear to see me leave his sight, and I didn't want to go either. Neither of us brought up what happened before. For now, just being able to keep each other company is enough. 17. Thomas needs a long period of rest and recovery. For a long time, even living like a normal person was a struggle for him, and his former department was no longer a good fit after another 6 months in the capital. Once Thomas had recovered enough to barely walk, he and I returned to the small mountain village where my household was registered to recuperate. From time to time, Thomas's former comrades in arms, colleagues, or people he had saved would take turns visiting him, and care packages from all over the country never stopped arriving. I didn't know the specifics of what he was doing, only that I'd occasionally see him and old man Arthur muttering over some ancient book. Whenever visitors came by, Thomas would struggle to get out of bed, forcing himself to act as if nothing was wrong, but in reality, whether at home or out in the hills and woods, he never left my side. He took complete charge of my daily needs: food, clothing, shelter, and transportation. It seemed he wanted to make up for all the past neglect, placing me at the very center of his life. The bamboo weavings, straw crafts, and wood carvings he made for me filled the entire shelf. Slingshots, crossbows, hidden weapons, kites, bamboo dragonflies, sandbags, shuttlecocks, and spinning tops. He played with me through each and every one. He also told me stories and shared life lessons. Even my quirky little habit of hoarding food at home was something he enthusiastically joined in on. Thomas also secretly told me, given the current situation, let's just lay low here for now. Son, don't you worry about the future. Last time I was abroad, I ran into your uncle. He's still alive, and now he's doing quite well for himself. As the eldest brother, he's like a father to us. He'll take care of us from now on. I'm not worried. Just 8 years old, I walked with light steps as his broad hand held mine, letting the dappled sunlight through the trees fall upon me. I'm now the happiest person in the whole world. I have the most wonderful father anyone could ask for. Story 2. With just 3 hours left before the zombie attack, I was reborn in the arms of a stranger. Kill me, I finally resigned myself to. Tell him, because that was our only hope for survival. The last button on my dress was undone when I suddenly opened my eyes and pushed him away. What's wrong? The man, half-dressed, was interrupted and looked at me quizzically with a raised eyebrow. What was wrong with me? I glanced at my phone. It was 11:53 p.m. I wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes, feeling somewhat dazed. Was it just a vivid nightmare fueled by alcohol, or had I really been bitten by a zombie, mutated, and then reborn? Wrapped tightly in the blanket, I shivered uncontrollably. Unsure of how to respond to him. If you don't want to continue, I won't force you. Clearly uncomfortable, the man stood up and walked into the bathroom without saying much more. Feeling woozy, I looked around the unfamiliar hotel room, trying hard to remember. That's right, today I had caught my boyfriend cheating and decisively broke up with him. Later at night, I went to a bar alone to drown my sorrows. While tipsy, I noticed a man who stood out from the crowd as he left a private room. His clean-cut business attire seemed out of place in the garish, indulgent setting of the bar. That's when I set my sights on him. Why should I be faithful in love only to be betrayed? If that scumbag could hook up with a rich woman, why couldn't I attract a successful man? In a surge of drunken impulse, I threw myself at him. I knocked my throbbing head a few times, desperately trying to recall the nightmarish scenes that followed in my memory. We did not continue our intimate encounter. Instead, I suddenly lost control of my emotions, clung to him, and sobbed up my grievances for a long time until I fell into a confused sleep. He indeed didn't take advantage of me, he just listened to my emotional outpouring for hours, until a loud door slam woke me abruptly from his embrace. As soon as we turned on the light, we saw a blood-covered waiter collapse at the foot of our bed, his face as pale as paper, crying out in terror, "Zombies! There are zombies! They're eating people!" I looked at my phone in astonishment. It was 2:50 a.m. The soundproofing in the star-rated hotel was excellent, but at that moment, chilling roars and deafening banging on the door from outside scared me terribly. The most horrifying thing was, just as we had managed to get dressed, the waiter mutated. Suddenly, her eyes blood-red and ferocious, she lunged at me, biting the hand I used to push her away. Pain. The pain made me sweat instantly, and I screamed in agony as I desperately kicked at her, but she still tore a piece of flesh from my hand. "Are you all right?" The man rushed over and knocked the waiter to the ground, anxiously inquiring about my condition. Before I could speak, the waiter sprang up from the ground with unnatural speed, lunging towards the man who was closer to her. I could clearly see the flesh from my hand still hanging in her gaping, bloodied mouth. "Watch out!" I cried out in terror, and the man was tackled to the ground. Struggling with the waiter, despite my fear, I tried to get up to help him, but suddenly felt dizzy, and the wound burned intensely. Pain, like boiling oil coursing through my veins with my blood, made me scream madly. The last thing I remember was the man desperately breaking the waiter's neck, and then I frantically lunged at him. "I'll be going first. Your car is parked in front of the hotel. Feel free to call room service before you check out tomorrow. I'll cover the costs." The man's voice interrupted my recollections. I saw him already neatly dressed, his figure trim and austere, the epitome of restraint. I wanted to speak, but he had already picked up his suit and left through the door, swallowing the words that almost slipped out. I sighed deeply. It was just a fleeting encounter fueled by alcohol. Why would he believe me if I told him that zombies were about to arrive? Even I couldn't be sure myself that the zombies would come in 3 hours. Yet, feeling terribly anxious, I quickly got up, washed up, grabbed my bag, and rushed home. What if those memories were real? Although the waiter had burst in at 2:50 a.m., that didn't mean the zombies outside would only appear then. I needed to get home as quickly as possible. While in the car, I called my roommate Chloe, who was still watching a midnight movie with her boyfriend celebrating their anniversary. I urged them to stop watching and come home immediately. Then, in the middle of the night, I could only go to a 24-hour convenience store, where I grabbed a lot of water, bread, instant noodles, and other daily necessities. I nearly cleared out several shelves, and the store clerk almost thought I was robbing the place. The streets were quiet in the early hours, and I reached the underground parking garage by 1:33 a.m. I called Chloe again. They said they were almost home, so I started moving stuff by myself, although I had carefully checked my surroundings and everything was dead quiet. A security guard zombie suddenly appeared and knocked me down as I was bending over to grab things from the trunk. The zombie, incredibly strong, bit directly into my throat. I didn't even have a chance to struggle. Blood choked my airways, and my screams abruptly ended. I could only desperately gasp for air, feeling like a fish pressed down on a cutting board. So zombies were real, and so was rebirth. Was the purpose of my rebirth just to be bitten by a zombie again? Suddenly, amidst hazy gasps, as I screamed and kicked the man who was bent over my neck away, I Opened my eyes to find, damn, I had reborn back to my bed again. You're crazy. The man fell to the floor unprepared, his face contorting with pain and anger. I covered my neck, where he had left a hickey, feeling the heat and trembling of my skin. Sorry, I didn't mean to kick you, I hurriedly explained. Then, trembling, I checked my phone. 11:53 p.m. Indeed, I had been reborn again. If you don't want to continue, just say it. I won't force you. He seemed very angry but didn't continue to lash out at me. He stood up, his disheveled, strong physique particularly tempting. Unable to look him in the eye, I quickly turned around and explained, I was just killed by a zombie, and I've just come back. We don't have time to continue. We need to prepare some supplies and think of a way to survive. I spoke anxiously, hoping he would believe me. The man looked at me with a slight surprise and then smirked. Turning to walk into the bathroom, it was clear he thought I was either an idiot or treating him like one. I'm serious. Zombies might be out there eating people right now. It's getting more dangerous by the minute, I explained loudly, but he closed the bathroom door without turning back, ignoring me completely. Hopelessly, I glanced at my phone again. 11:56 p.m. No point waiting if he didn't believe me. I couldn't afford to waste time. I quickly got dressed and left the house, calling Chloe to urgently come home. At that moment, everything outside was calm, with no news on the internet. It was the calm before the storm. After clearing out the shelves of the convenience store near my building entrance, I paid a delivery guy to bring the goods up using the elevator, and then I locked myself early at home. I was just a 25-year-old ordinary office worker. I'm no elite female warrior. How could I not be terrified facing those brutal, ferocious zombies? I hope that this time we can stay safely at home and hold out until rescue arrives. After all, the zombie outbreak happened in the early hours when most people were asleep at home. Perhaps if we can hold on for a while, the military will be able to eliminate the infected. That's what I tell myself to find some comfort. But Chloe and her boyfriend Blake didn't come home early as usual. At 1:38 a.m., the door burst open, and there was Blake, biting into the back of Chloe's neck as they stumbled into the hallway. Scarlet, help, save me. Chloe's cream-colored coat was soaked with blood as she lay on the ground, desperately reaching out to me, her face a mess of tears and blood. I screamed like a madwoman and rushed forward, swinging a hammer I had found earlier, frantically smashing it down on Blake. I had no family left. Chloe was my only close friend. Since college, we had been inseparable, almost like sisters. Warm, bloody fluid mixed with some unidentifiable liquid splattered all over me. I felt like vomiting, wanted to hide in a corner and cry my eyes out. But I wanted to save Chloe more, even though I knew it was too late. Finally, Blake lay motionless on the floor, and my hands trembled uncontrollably as tears streamed down my face. But just as I thought it was over, Chloe suddenly leaped up from the ground and lunged at me with a ferocity far beyond any wild beast. Looking into the familiar yet estranged face of Chloe, I knew I had lost any chance of escape. The strength of a zombie was too much for an ordinary woman like me to withstand. Not wanting to be bitten, my mind went blank, and I ran to the balcony and jumped from the 6th floor. I thought jumping would be a swift end, but as my consciousness faded, I lay sprawled in the flower bed below, still unable to escape the hellish pain of my shattered body. Idiot. I really wasn't thinking. I'll never jump from a low floor again. When I opened my eyes again, the insane pain still lingered in my mind. I clung to the man beside me, shaking uncontrollably, unleashing all the screams I couldn't voice before I died in bed. You. The man looked up at me in astonishment, his eyes as clear and bright as obsidian, full of disbelief. He must have never encountered a woman who screamed so tragically in bed. Realizing what was happening, I covered my eyes with one hand, feeling the hot tears on my cheeks. I'm not assaulting you, am I? The man seemed unsure, cautiously moving away from me. I'm truly sorry. I know it's very uncomfortable for a man to be interrupted like this, but I had to. Sorry. It's not your fault. I have something urgent. I need to go. I pushed him aside and staggered into the bathroom to wash my face, trying to sober up completely. I wanted to survive, to save Chloe, not to resign myself to fate. I believe that being given a second chance at life must have a special purpose, not just to leave me caught between living and dying. Quickly getting ready to leave, I glanced back at the man standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows and offered a final friendly warning. The zombie virus outbreak is imminent. Go home quickly, stock up on food and drinks, and make sure you lock your doors. He looked back at me, frowning. I knew he wouldn't believe me and turned to leave, checking my phone. It was 12:08 a.m. This time I went straight to the cinema to find Chloe, dragging them desperately home. This time we managed to escape home with supplies in time, but zombies seemed to have particularly sharp hearing. Just a brief argument between Chloe and Blake attracted a zombie that banged on our door. As time went on, the sounds of doors slamming, windows breaking, and screams filled the building. I ran to the balcony and saw a man across the street, desperately running out of his bedroom holding his blood-covered child, shouting for help. Just as he opened his front door, a woman caught up to him and tackled him viciously. Some people, overwhelmed like me, jumped from their buildings, others screamed as they fled their homes, and some even grabbed knives to defend themselves against their once loved ones turned violent. More and more lights turned on, but the once cozy nights were replaced with horrific scenes of slaughter. It turned out that some had already been infected, and the person next to you might suddenly turn into a demonic mutant. What on earth was happening? How did these mutations occur? I couldn't figure it out then. A second and third zombie appeared at our door, even as we hid silently in the bedroom closet. The zombies outside banged against the door relentlessly like perpetual motion machines. Trembling, I checked my phone. It was 2:36 a.m. I realized that in my previous deaths, I had died too early to know that within an hour, the entire complex would turn into a zombie playground. The virus spread incredibly fast, and the zombies were unusually strong. Was there anywhere left safe in the city? Clutching a hammer, my heart turned to ice. Eventually, our security door was broken through, and the bedroom door couldn't withstand the blows either. We were annihilated. Opening my eyes again, I resolved to find Chloe. Since the security door couldn't keep the zombies out, we decided to drive out of the city, hoping that other places might not have been affected by the virus. The first time we hit the road smoothly, but when passing through the neighboring county, we found the roads blocked by cars from an accident. As we tried to turn around and find another route, we were quickly surrounded by 5 or 6 zombies. Our car was overturned, and no one escaped. The last thing I saw was the time flashing on the car's display, 2:35 a.m. It turned out the virus had already spread to the neighboring county, and in considerable numbers. Next time, we continued to flee. I informed Chloe and the others about the zombie virus outbreak and strongly suggested, despite their initial skepticism, that we take a different route to a less populated countryside in hopes of finding refuge. But as we left a small supermarket at a gas station in the suburbs, we saw a zombie biting into a woman's throat just a few meters away. Under a streetlight, blood splattering everywhere, they finally believed what I had said, and Chloe screamed in terror. The zombie, alarmed, growled and lunged at us. I was accidentally tripped by one of them, and Blake pulled Chloe and ran. Zombies bite the last person first. Let's run. Scarlett, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Chloe cried, looking back and apologizing, but she didn't stop running, even managing to carry 2 large bags of food with her. Though a zombie was formidable, the 3 of us could likely have overcome it together, but apparently, I wasn't worth their life-risking effort. How ridiculous. The close friend I persistently tried to save could abandon me at any moment. Such is human nature. I died again, not just in body but with an exceptionally cold heart. Back in bed, I hugged my partner and cried hysterically for several minutes, mourning my tragic friendship, and then continued to flee amidst his astonished gaze. This time, I didn't seek out Chloe but instead secured the presidential suite at the top floor of a building. I gathered a huge pile of supplies from the supermarket, telling the hotel staff I was planning a party the next day and that no one should enter without my call. I closed the heavy bronze doors of the presidential suite behind me, gasping for breath. With only an hour or two to prepare, where could I go? Once out of the city, where would I find refuge? Remembering the zombies' terrifying strength and keen senses, I didn't expect the bronze doors to hold them off for long, and being trapped inside, I would inevitably run out of water and food. All I wanted was a quiet place to survive a few more days, gather more information, and organize my thoughts. At least I could plan and prepare better for the next escape, no longer flitting about like a headless fly, without guns and unable to purchase enough sleeping pills. Surviving is hard, and dying neatly is just as difficult. Each time being bitten to death felt like undergoing purgatory over and over, with despair and breakdown just a step away. That's why I chose a room on the top floor of the hotel, thinking that if I were cornered by zombies, jumping from the small balcony would be less painful. At 2 a.m., standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows and looking down, I could see more and more people desperately running in the streets. Cars collided in the distance, emitting eerie flames. The Star Hotel's windows were so well soundproofed that only a faint noise could be heard. Due to the pneumonia epidemic, the hotel's occupancy rate was not high, so for the first time, I cried myself to exhaustion and fell asleep, oblivious to the situation outside. Suddenly, there was a violent banging on the door, which made my scalp tighten. Miss Scarlett, please open the door. Please let us in. There are monsters outside. I had miscalculated. Hotel staff had access cards to use the private elevator to the top floor, and some knew I had stocked up on supplies, so it was no surprise they would flee here. I heard 2 beeps, signaling someone outside was using a MasterCard to unlock the door, but I had already locked the door from the inside and wedged it shut with the back of a chair. Gritting my teeth, I was torn inside. 5 or 6 minutes had passed. It seemed there were no bitten people outside. Should I let them in? If they kept knocking like that, they would eventually attract zombies. And I feared the bronze door wouldn't withstand an onslaught of so many zombies. Zombies are too ferocious. It's hard to survive alone. Should I try banding together for survival? Even if I lose, I'd have a chance to start over, so it's worth a try to save a few people. So I gritted my teeth and removed the barricades. But just as I opened the door, the elevator doors also opened, and several zombies rushed out, clawing at the elevator doors. There was also a person lying in the elevator, bloodied and twisted beyond recognition. It was bad luck. My heart clenched. It was too late to close the door. 6 or 7 men and women outside screamed desperately, pushing open the door and leading in zombies like demons from hell. Save me, please. A waiter bitten on the ankle fell to the ground, desperately crying and clutching my legs, his fingertips digging into my flesh as painfully as being torn by zombies. Under the cold night wind on the balcony, I ultimately couldn't jump, and once again became a feast for the zombies. My flesh was torn apart, and just before closing my eyes, I watched myself being disemboweled. Damn the idea of banding together. I really brought this on myself. Despair and intense pain gradually devoured my sanity, and tightly closing my eyes couldn't escape the bloody and horrifying demonic faces. I could only madly resist in vain. No, get away. Stop. What are you doing? A man's angry shout came. Yet again, there was the ambiguous light, the comfortable big bed, the faint aroma of alcohol mixed with the sweaty scent, everything so enchantingly tempting. The man's face, however, looked terrible. He had several bloody marks on his face and exposed shoulders, which were shocking to see. But I'm back. Finally, I had returned from that terrifying place. Each time I felt myself sinking into hell, this man would appear. Seeing him, I knew the pain was over. At least the cycle of death was. Tears suddenly fell like a torrential downpour, quickly wetting the pillow beneath me. I couldn't help crying again, this time not wanting to stop ever. The anger on his face slowly faded, and he carefully let go of my hands, somewhat at a loss. Did I hurt you, or are you having second thoughts? I shook my head desperately, crying so hard I couldn't catch my breath. Forget it. If you don't want to, just say so. I won't. The man thought I was regretting and resisting fiercely, so he started to get dressed. Thinking of leaving, in panic, I threw myself at him, clinging tightly around his waist, pleading, "Don't go. Stay with me. Please stay with me." His strong heartbeat and the warmth of his body proved he was a real, living person, the only lifeline I could grasp as I was on the brink of collapse. Am I a fool? After all this turmoil, I haven't lived any longer actually. Those first 3 hours I stayed by his side were the most peaceful, indeed. Just like the first time, he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned back against the headboard, spread his arms, and let me cry into his chest without minding the tears soaking his shirt, even handing me tissues. Only when my crying subsided to sobbing did he speak. Heartbroken. "It's not worth it for such a man." I was slightly startled, taking another tissue from him. Before my first rebirth, he had said the same. That time, I had indeed been crying over a worthless man, but not now. After several cycles of life and death, some people had faded into insignificance, yet this man, whom I thought was a stranger, had become the object of my current desire. Yeah, you're right. But it's not about romance that I'm breaking down. He was right. It's not worth it for someone unworthy. Curled up in his arms, I greedily enjoyed this moment of peace, feeling very reassured. "You looked really scared just now," he said. "What if I told you I just had a terrible nightmare? Would you believe me?" After wiping away my last tears, I looked up and noticed the scratches on his skin, bleeding slightly, and quickly apologized. He frowned lightly and said, "It's just a scratch, but is sleeping with me what caused your nightmare?" All right, it was me who indulged in alcohol and dragged him to this room, and then I had a nightmare while he was so involved. That must have felt incredibly insulting to him. No, it's not that. I'll explain in a moment. Let me get some medicine first. It was an awkward moment. I hurriedly dressed and called room service for antiseptic and other medical supplies. Then while applying the medicine, I detailed the cycles of rebirth I had just gone through. As I spoke, I tried to control my emotions, but my trembling hands, holding the cotton swab, betrayed my fear, perhaps fearing to trigger another breakdown. He didn't express disbelief this time. He listened quietly as I described my last moments being devoured by zombies. Then he picked up his phone. It was 1:19 a.m. "You said at 2:50 a.m. a waiter will burst into our room, attracting zombies, and then you'll get bitten and turn into a zombie, and bite me. You've been through many cycles of rebirth, sometimes turning into a zombie, sometimes being killed outright. And each time you wake up at 11:53 a.m., he succinctly repeated the key points I had told him, and I nodded in agreement. When we entered the room, we were both drunk, went straight to the point, and even forgot to lock the door, which otherwise wouldn't have allowed the waiter to easily swipe and enter for help. The man got up, started browsing videos and checking the news on his phone. The internet still seemed calm, but after a quarter of an hour, looking out from the 30th floor window, we could See chaos starting to erupt on the streets. Videos and comments about zombie attacks began appearing online. The outbreak of the zombie virus quickly became a trending topic. My heart, which had barely calmed, clenched tightly again, and I unconsciously hugged my arms. It looks like this city is the epicenter of the virus, the man said gravely. At that moment, he had no choice but to believe. Indeed, I didn't know where the virus came from, but only after the outbreak in Pingmo City, where we did news of zombies start spreading online everywhere. It was clear that this area was among the first to experience the outbreak, and it was widespread, affecting the surrounding regions. He tried to make a call on his phone, but no one answered on the other end. Then, turning to me, he asked, "Why can you keep coming back to life?" "I don't know. If I'm doomed, I'd rather die once and for all, than die horribly over and over again. I'm really going insane." I clasped my head, overwhelmed once again by the horrific images flooding my mind. If anyone says you get used to dying, or that you stop fearing pain after enough of it, I'd be profoundly grateful. I was both terrified and furious. What did I do to deserve this? Why has fate chosen me to endure this endless torment? After all, my boyfriend cheated on me, my best friend abandoned me, I might as well have gone to see my parents sooner. Why must I live through this bloody, terrifying apocalypse in such unbearable pain? Heaven must have given you these chances to come back for a reason. It shows you are unique, definitely important to this world. The man suddenly spoke, gently prying my hands apart. "Tell me, do you want to die or do you want to live?" he asked. I was startled, then looked up to see the seriousness in his eyes. "I want to live. I don't want to die again." I nodded emphatically. "Right, as long as there's a sliver of hope. Who would choose death?" "Good. Remember, my name is Ryan. I'm 29 years old, a lighting designer, and I run a lighting design company. My new cloud password, for 68169. When you see me next time, tell me these details straight away, and I'll take you to my friend's Nine Creeks Villa for refuge." "Got it," he said solemnly. "A place of refuge." I was overjoyed, silently repeating the information until I had memorized it. Then I nodded vigorously. Then Ryan said, "There's no way out if we stay here. Let's go. We need to try more ways to survive." "Yes, okay, maybe next time I would have a chance to survive, to escape the bone-deep despair and pain." Looking at the man before me, my will to live was reignited. At 2:03 a.m., we took the elevator down to the lobby, only to find it overrun. Waitstaff and passersby were being bitten and torn at by zombies, their screams echoing amidst the shocking crimson all around. The light shining through the hotel's clear glass facade continuously attracted more zombies, their speed comparable to sprinters in a 100-meter dash. Upstairs, spotting zombies sprinting towards us, Ryan grabbed my hand and we dashed back towards the elevator. We had just risen half a floor when a thunderous bang sounded from the elevator doors below. The base of the elevator shook, and I gripped the handrail tightly, my heart skipping a beat. The strength and speed of these zombies mean that the chances of an ordinary person escaping them head-on are very slim. Listening to the zombies smashing through the elevator doors below and their eerie howls as they fell down the shaft, Ryan's expression grew grimmer, his body tensing up even more. Indeed, I felt that aside from a slightly longer mutation period, these zombies were only slightly less formidable than the strongest ones in World War Z. The virus has already spread outside. It's definitely tough to move on the ground now. However, there's a helipad on the hotel rooftop. Let's head up and see if we can wait for an aerial rescue. Ryan decisively made the decision, and I had no objections. Ryan's company was responsible for designing and installing the exterior lighting and the helipad of the hotel, so he led me straight to the rooftop entrance. However, the entrance was secured with an access control lock, and Ryan had to use a fire axe to break open the door. Soon after, panicked guests and staff began running up, eventually attracting the zombies. Everyone desperately held the door against the zombies, but the door couldn't withstand their frenzied battering. And eventually, the rooftop also fell prey to the rampaging zombies. There was simply nowhere safe in the city. Ryan and I stood on the edge of the 35th floor, the lights of fires twinkling below us, screams tearing through the night sky. The cold night wind fluttered my skirt, making me shiver. I glanced at the time one last time. It was 2:46 a.m. The height here will make it less painful. Don't be afraid. I'm here with you. His warm palm pressed against the back of my head, his arms tightened around my waist, and my vision went dark as I was locked in Ryan's strong embrace. The roar of the zombies was inches away, with the chilling sweep of their claws brushing my bare legs, causing my hairs to stand on end. In the last moment, I tightly wrapped my arms around his waist and fell with him from the 100-meter-high building. The sound of wind rushed by my ears, my head dizzy from the lack of oxygen as I slipped into unconsciousness, but being tightly held in his embrace, I wasn't so scared anymore. This time, I didn't scream. A slight pain from a gentle bite on my neck and the faint, familiar scent of the man brought me back from my dizziness. Knowing he was now in high spirits, I really wanted to immerse myself further, but I couldn't delay any longer and had to push him away. Stop, get up first. But he seemed not to hear me, still trying to remove his last piece of clothing, to survive this time. I bit down hard and forcefully pushed him away with my knees. Ryan. Stop and listen to me. He suddenly looked up at me, his face shifting from obsession to shock. How do you know my name? Ryan's gaze sharpened. I quickly grabbed the blanket to cover myself and hurriedly explained. I just came back from a rebirth after a zombie apocalypse. It was you in my past life who told me your name is Ryan. You're 29 years old, a lighting designer. You just changed your cloud password to 468169. You also said you would take me to Joshi Villa for refuge. Such jumbled information was obviously hard to accept, and Ryan was clearly shocked and confused, but time waits for no one. I got up to get dressed quickly. Don't just stand there. We need to leave. The zombie virus will spread soon. I'll explain in detail on the way. I checked my phone. It was 0:05 a.m. I really couldn't waste any more time picking up a coat from the floor and throwing it to him. I said anxiously, can we just pretend I want to change locations? I really don't want to be bitten to death by zombies over and over again. What's your name? He suddenly asked, staring at me. I'm Scarlett, 25 years old, a professional illustrator. I got heartbroken last night, so went to a bar to drown my sorrows. Then I saw you and thought you looked nice, so I approached you. I've died many times. Ryan finally accepted what I was saying. As he listened to me quickly recount the events, he got dressed neatly and was ready in no time. Your story is quite incredible, but I believe my password, which I just changed and wouldn't be known by anyone unless I told them myself. So for now, I'll trust you. Tell me, what do we do next? We need to get as far away from the city as possible, I said decisively. Before long, we were in his SUV parked outside the hotel, speeding along the normally quiet streets. The time was 12:20 a.m. I recounted my experiences of being reborn several times and summarized the characteristics of zombies again. Zombies are incredibly strong and fast. Once they charge, the impact is terrifying and typical household security doors and windows can't stop them, I explained. Moreover, zombies have exceptionally sharp hearing and smell. The only way to kill them is to shoot them in the head. A slight bite or scratch from them can infect a human with the virus, which takes about 2 to 5 minutes to cause mutation. Zombies prioritize biting in crowded places. If there's no one else around, they might start devouring a person, I continued. Also, large, noisy groups are not suitable for survival, so it's best to avoid moving in teams. Nearby towns aren't safe either, and ordinary vehicles can't keep zombies out. These insights were bought with my own tragic and bloody experiences. Listening to me, Ryan looked serious. He first called his parents to make sure they were vacationing on an island and urged them not to return to the mainland. Then he called a friend and got through immediately, receiving a password. It turned out his friend was about to attend an important meeting, which is why he hadn't answered the phone last time. After hanging up, Ryan said, the security at Joshi Villas is good, but the building has just been renovated. Except for electricity and water, there are no supplies. If we want to survive there, we'll need to bring everything: food, drink, clothing, everything. Since it was the middle of the night, there was no place to buy clothes or bedding, but we were close to my home, so we took a detour there. We arrived at my building at 12:42 a.m., moving quickly to avoid any zombies. Once inside, I quickly changed out of my dress into outdoor sportswear and running shoes, then packed up the bedding from my bed. Ryan efficiently filled a large suitcase with various necessities: laundry supplies, toilet paper, towels, a rice cooker, snacks, canned food, fruits, vitamin tablets. One suitcase was not enough. He eventually pulled out a bedsheet from the cupboard, using it as a wrapping cloth to make a big bag full of supplies. Seeing the capacity was enough, I also found a clean sheet in Chloe's room and packed my own clothes into another full bag. Realizing there was no place prepared for Ryan's clothes, I also packed some of Blake's jackets and trousers. Then we locked up and left. It was 1:06 a.m. when we drove out of the complex and headed to a 24-hour convenience store to raid for food and daily necessities. Ryan handed the clerk 30,000 yuan without waiting for each item to be scanned, just moving everything directly. We emptied the necessary shelves, even clearing out the storage room, until Ryan's large SUV was completely full. You better close up and go home. Don't do business tonight, I advised the clerk, having already raided his store several times before. Just as we were leaving, I suddenly heard someone loudly calling me. Scarlett, buying so much stuff in the middle of the night. I stopped and looked towards the voice. Under the streetlight nearby, there was Chloe, one arm hooked through Blake's, the other waving high at me. She held a large bouquet of roses, smiling happily, completely unaware of the fast-moving, stumbling shadow with one arm missing, rushing towards them from behind. Watch out behind you, run. My heart tightened, and I couldn't help but shout a warning to them. Chloe and Blake turned around in surprise to look. The man was merely 10 meters away from them, his ferocious and hideous face clearly visible under the streetlight. Chloe screamed in terror. Blake reacted quickly, grabbing Chloe and trying to Run, but in high heels, Chloe couldn't run fast. In an instant, a zombie pounced on her ferociously, and her screams, accompanied by splattering blood, echoed through the street. Seeing this, Blake was so frightened that he let go of her hand and ran for his life. Meanwhile, the young man from the convenience store, hearing the commotion, rushed out without understanding the situation, attempting to help. "Don't go." My eyes welled up with tears as I quickly reached out to stop him, but the young man didn't heed me. "Get in the car." Ryan had already started the car and was shouting at me. As I saw Blake running towards us, I took one last look at Chloe, who was struggling in her last moments, clenched my teeth, turned around, and hurried into the passenger seat, slamming the door shut. "Scarlett, wait for me, wait for me." In the rearview mirror, I saw the convenience store guy get tackled, and Blake nearly grabbed the rear car door but was thrown off as Ryan floored the accelerator. The face of terror and anger flashed by and then disappeared from the rearview mirror. I knew he wouldn't survive. It was a pity about the young man. In the end, I had abandoned them too. I closed my eyes, took a couple of deep breaths, and forced the tears back, clenching my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my flesh, causing pain. "Don't worry, I won't leave you behind," Ryan suddenly said. I turned to look at him. His expression was solemn, and I slowly relaxed my grip. The car's display glowed. 1:36 a.m., an emergency broadcast interrupted the radio. It was early morning, and the streets were nearly empty. The virus hadn't yet spread widely. Ryan drove fast, and soon we were out of the city. We sped along, passing car accident scenes without daring to stop for the cries for help. As we drove through a small town, a zombie suddenly charged at us head-on. "Run it over. Don't stop the car," I yelled, gripping the handle above the passenger seat tightly. I remembered the scenes where cars had been stopped only to be smashed and overturned by several zombies, which made me break out in a cold sweat. Ryan hesitated for only a moment before slamming down on the accelerator. With a loud bang, the zombie was flung away, and the front of the car was heavily dented. At the same time, another zombie suddenly leaped from an overturned car at the roadside, coming straight at us. Then another thud. The zombie's head shattered the passenger side window. The mixture of red and white fluid smeared across the window, and I had to bite my lip hard to keep from vomiting. Luckily, Ryan's car was sturdy. If it had been my economical sedan, the glass would have probably shattered instantly, but if we endured a few more hits like that, even the SUV wouldn't hold up. With their terrifying strength, these fearless zombies were a formidable force. More zombies appeared one after another ahead, but thankfully, Ryan's driving skills were excellent, and the road wasn't blocked. He calmly maneuvered the car in an S shape, effectively reducing some of the impact and sending several zombies in the dark night flying away. It wasn't until we had completely shaken off the zombies chasing us that I finally let go of the handle, realizing my palms were sweaty. After about half an hour of driving, we smoothly made our way to the mountains, turning onto a small road amidst dense woods. Soon, we saw a fenced area of about 500 to 600 square meters in the forest, with a 3-story building in the middle. Kyle is a physics genius, specializing in quantum mechanics. Recently, he went abroad with a government group for an academic exchange. He enjoys the tranquility, so he insisted on building a house alone in the mountains. "Let's go inside first, and he'll contact me after his meeting is over," said Ryan as he opened the gate to the yard and drove the car into the garage. He took out his phone to check the time. It was already 3:25 a.m. We finally made it out of the city alive, and I couldn't help but sigh with relief after getting out of the car and seeing the body of the car covered in dents and stained with blood. I felt a wave of fright. We entered the house through the small door in the garage and moved the supplies upstairs, trip by trip. The hard furnishings inside were already completed and cleaned. However, there were few pieces of furniture, and the whole house was empty, with some leftover decorating tools tossed in a corner. Fortunately, the kitchen and bathroom were fully equipped. After setting down our things, we first pulled down all the curtains and blinds on the first floor to check for security and to ensure no one outside could see inside. Then Ryan led me to the study, where he pressed a seemingly normal spot on the custom-built bookshelf, revealing a hidden keypad. I was amazed and widened my eyes. There was a secret mechanism. After entering the code, a row of bookshelves silently opened up to reveal a security door about 10 centimeters thick, with stairs leading downward behind it. Kyle likes to quietly work on his experiments, so the security is excellent. There's also a lab, storage, and a separate bathroom downstairs, though it's all empty now, Ryan explained, but the house's water and electricity can operate independently, and there's a satellite phone, radio, and full house surveillance video set up in the basement. The doors and windows are soundproofed and blast resistant, so they should hold off a small number of zombies. Ryan showed me around, detailing the structure of the House, his phone rang at that moment, and Ryan quickly answered. Kyle, we've arrived at Joshi Villa. How are things on your end? Ryan, I'm glad you're safe. The infection has been found abroad as well. I'm about to evacuate with the embassy staff and head back to the country to a secure base. I'll try to arrange a helicopter to rescue you guys once I'm back. Kyle's voice was breathless, clearly running and speaking urgently. Ryan quickly asked, do you know how the zombie virus started? Kyle, being a nationally recognized physicist, might have access to information that others don't. It seems that the KB organization overseas released a biological virus in several major cities around the world at the same time. This primitive virus spread through water sources. After a certain period, people with susceptible constitutions begin to mutate and become poisoned. After mutation, the virus transitions to being spread through bodily fluids, infecting everyone. There is no vaccine yet, nor any immune individuals, so the situation is very severe. We need to prepare for a long battle. I need to handle some procedures. I'll contact you when I'm free, said Kyle, amidst a noisy backdrop. Wait, let me ask one more thing. If a person could repeatedly resurrect at the same time and place after death, do you think that's possible? I remember you once mentioned a related theory, Ryan asked loudly. Hearing Ryan's words, my heart tightened and I listened intently. Resurrection. The most likely scenario would be finding a time loophole coordinate to reset. That's exactly what I've been researching independently. No one has succeeded yet, but theoretically, it's possible. A lot of big shots laugh at me, saying I'm chasing fantasies. Why do you suddenly ask? Ryan glanced at me, hesitated for a moment, and then said, just curious. When you have time, let's discuss it in detail, he said. Something stirred inside me. Was he trying to protect me, afraid that I would become an experimental subject? Just curious. Kyle sounded puzzled over the phone. Then amidst a burst of noise, someone shouted his name, urging him to hurry up with the procedures. I'll get back to you as soon as I'm on the plane, Kyle yelled, then hung up. I let out the breath I had been holding, but then excitement surged through me. So, Ryan actually had such an incredible friend. Then what was all that about me repeatedly running out and getting devoured alive by zombies? No wonder he believed my sci-fi story of Rebirth after I shared Ryan's personal information. It seems there was a reason fate brought me to him. Thank you, Ryan. Although Kyle said he wasn't successful just now, it doesn't mean he won't be in the future. Perhaps my rebirth was because of him. If we know the principle, there's hope for liberation. In short, I really don't want to go through death and back to life again. Of course, if I could keep living like this, that would be the best solution. At that moment, I finally felt that hope was limitless. We waited for Kyle to call again, but even by dawn, there was no ring. Ryan tried calling him, only to get a cannot connect message. My heart sank again, and I shared Ryan's worries. Had something happened to Kyle? As dawn broke, several zombies appeared outside the yard, constantly growling and violently hitting the gate and walls. Not good. Could it be that the car accidentally hit a person or an animal, leaving behind a trail of blood that attracted the zombies? Ryan and I had the same thought and hurried to the garage to check. Sure enough, we found a bloody black puppy corpse hooked in the gap of the dented rear bumper. It was too dark and rushed last night. None of us noticed. Just as we were about to clean up the corpse, the garage door suddenly made a loud bang and was dented and startled. I stumbled and fell to the ground, my heart clenched tightly, instantly unable to breathe. The zombies had entered the yard. Run. Ryan quickly picked up a steel spike from the ground and pulled me towards the small door of the garage. Bang, bang, bang. 1, 2, more and more dents appeared on the garage door, growing larger. We hurriedly shut the small door tightly, and Ryan grabbed a nearby paint can, splashing half a bucket of paint onto the door. We then heard a loud crash as the garage door was knocked down. Ryan pulled me along, running to the study on the other side. Seeing that the zombies hadn't attacked the small door, we finally dared to breathe a sigh of relief. We looked at each other, hearts pounding. We couldn't enter the garage, and with 7 or 8 zombies wandering in the yard, we were trapped. In the following days, we had to be extremely careful inside the house, fearing any noise might alert them. However, we still couldn't get in touch with Kyle. Days later, many cities had completely fallen. News reports indicated that the zombie virus was spreading outward from several major cities, with the military struggling to defend, steadily losing ground. The same disaster was unfolding worldwide. The zombies' combat and infection abilities were too strong. If the virus spread couldn't be controlled, it would soon be the end of humanity. Gradually, external communications networks broke down, the weather grew colder, and our spirits heavier. We've tried contacting various local emergency services through satellite phone, but none of the calls went through. The radio did announce the addresses and contact numbers of survivors' bases, but Unfortunately, they were all far from us. Even after we managed to contact a base, they could only suggest that we find our own way there. From the sporadic radio broadcasts, we learned that one by one, the survivors' bases on land were being destroyed. Fortunately, the island base where Ryan's parents were located was still intact. However, later their mobile signal was lost, and we lost contact with them too. Ryan and I had considered escaping, but being in one of the regions where the virus originated, there were hardly any survivors left around us, not to mention any rescue options. Outside were only zombies with overwhelming strength, and getting trapped by them meant slim chances of survival. But what if we don't hear from Kyle? Our supplies will soon run out. Then what? This house is our fortress protecting us, but it's also a prison with nothing left inside. During this agonizing wait, the temperature in the mountains quickly dropped below zero. I only brought one set of bedding, which we spread on the solid wood floor of the study, each of us sleeping on one side. Initially, we slept distantly like the demilitarized zone, politely and clearly separated, but one morning when I woke up, I found myself curled up in Ryan's arms. He didn't push me away. Instead, he held me tighter, careful not to let the cold air seep in. Gradually, I got used to waking up in his arms, accustomed to his companionship in this cold, hopeless world. As time swiftly passed, we've been trapped here for 46 days. Waking up in the morning and peering through the slit in the curtains, I saw heavy snow falling outside. The air was bone-chillingly cold, and I really didn't want to leave Ryan's warm embrace. We only have enough food for 2 or 3 more days, and Kyle probably won't call or send help. Ryan, kill me. Let's start over. His body tensed noticeably. After a moment, I was pulled into his chest, feeling our heartbeats pounding louder and louder. You said you didn't want to die again, his voice low and slightly bitter. I looked up at him and smiled faintly. Yes, I'm afraid of pain. I don't want to die, but dying one more time is for a new hope. Don't worry, I brought painkillers from home. It won't hurt this time. I really dislike when the game level gets too high and having to restart from the beginner village, but being able to start over, isn't that also a kind of fortune? At this point, I'm thankful I can be reborn, starting everything over. Though, there's always a faint unease and regret in my heart, because he will forget me, and won't remember any of these hard days we've spent together. Although we lie together, warming each other, he has never made a more intimate move, instead being somewhat cautious. But the more he does this, the more my heart flutters. I admit, I've become greedy, initially coveting his body, his looks, now I also covet his heart. But I'm really useless, having died so many times without any progress. Unable to save our lives, once we're reborn and successfully escape, I must confess to him. That's what I was thinking. Then shortly after getting up, due to the stress, my long-delayed period finally began. The noses of the zombies outside are much sharper than a dog's. Soon, they became agitated and swarmed toward the house, screeching and slamming into the glass and walls. Even more terrifying was that their howls could attract even more zombies, even if I hid in the sealed basement. The zombies outside didn't disperse, but at least they were less restless. When I go back after being reborn, contraceptives are essential. If that doesn't work out, tampons are better than sanitary pads. After rebirth, we need to outpace the spread of the zombie virus and head straight for the island base before it spreads completely. The dangers on the road are many, and the chances of survival outside are slim. But I still have a chance to fight. If it doesn't work out the first time, I'll keep trying, and if all else fails, I'll die and start over. In any case, I'm determined to fight until I can survive with him. I'm not afraid of dying again. I made up my mind quietly, once I memorized all the information and escape routes from the radio and handed Ryan the steel spike. Then, grabbing a handful of painkillers, I bravely said, taking too many painkillers will knock me out. Just aim straight for my heart so I won't feel a thing. Let's do this. Ryan's veins on the back of his hand bulged, his chest heaving more intensely than mine. As I was about to swallow the pills, my arm was suddenly yanked away. No, I can't kill you. I don't want to forget you, Scarlet. There's still a chance. Let's wait. Maybe we'll think of another way to escape. Maybe if we hold on a few more days, Cal might bring help. Ryan dropped the spike and gripped my shoulders, pinching them painfully. I opened my eyes in surprise, my heart beating wildly. Could it be that he might have feelings for me? Just then, the satellite phone in the basement suddenly rang. Could it be Kyle? We exchanged a glance of wild joy. Ryan snatched the pills from my hand and rushed to answer the phone, but after just a few words, the smile that had just appeared on Ryan's face froze. He looked at me, his eyes slowly reddening. All I knew was that it was Kyle's assistant on the line, and he said, "Kyle is dead. What happened?" I asked cautiously after a while, as Ryan hung up the phone. He missed the first flight back to the country by just a step. He and a few other scientists from our country were kidnapped by local agents. It took our country more than a month to negotiate their return, but Kyle was attacked by zombies there on the way back. Ryan choked up and stopped. It was the first time I saw tears in his eyes. Once the zombie virus outbreak began, the veneer between nations was ripped apart. It seemed that scientists had become a valuable resource coveted by all countries in this apocalyptic world. Now, the apocalypse seemed to be a man-made disaster caused by everyone scrambling for resources. During his captivity, Kyle never stopped thinking about rescuing Ryan. His assistant called Ryan as soon as he escaped. I understood the pain Ryan felt losing his close friend. I stepped forward and rubbed his shoulder, comforting him. "Don't worry, we still have a chance. When I go back after being reborn, I'll have you call Kyle immediately. Tell him he must catch that first flight." Suddenly, Ryan hugged me tightly, so tightly I almost couldn't breathe. "Scarlett, you can't die. From the moment you survive 3 hours, you can't be reborn again, and neither can Kyle come back to life." Wow. I was utterly stunned. Owen has been working on projects with Kyle and is also an expert in quantum physics. Although he can't solve the difficulties of time reversal, his theories are clear. It was mentioned. He just said that the first time a person dies in reverse time rebirth is a critical node, if the time of the first death is linked to the point of rebirth to form a circle. No matter how many times the reborn person dies and is reborn within this circle, and no matter what different events occur in between, the future remains unchanged. For example, if you are reborn about 3 hours before your first death, those 3 hours form a circle. As long as you die within those 3 hours, you will always be reborn at 11:53. Everything and everyone you've changed, including the whole world, will revert back to their original state. But now that you've lived past those 3 hours, you've stepped out of that circle and drawn a new timeline that didn't exist before, and you can't go back to that rebirth point. You've changed your own fate and that of others connected to you. This is a one-way straight line. Once it's broken, just like any ordinary person. Hearing Ryan explain this, it took me a while to grasp the reality. So, if I just endured those 3 hours, I would have broken the vicious cycle of life and death. But when I want to die, I can't, and when I need to be reborn, I can't come back to life. Should I be happy or despair? What should we do next? Owen said he'd try to request help from the base. "Don't worry, we'll find a way to escape," Ryan said solemnly. I knew he was trying to comfort me. Now, with severe shortages in manpower and firepower, and survivor bases continually being overrun by zombies, why would the authorities waste resources to rescue two insignificant people deep in a virus-infested area? If Owen's words were so effective, he wouldn't just say he'd try. Unless I report that I am a rebirth, would I then become a subject of experimentation, or once again a prisoner of time? The mere thought of not being able to control my own life or death made me shiver. If that were the case, I'd rather die. But thinking about the last few bags of instant noodles and snacks, I knew we couldn't wait any longer. "Maybe you should tell Owen about my rebirth. Perhaps the base will take it seriously and send help sooner," I suggested. If Kyle were still here, it might be worth considering. But he's gone, and all the scientific data was destroyed. If someone really takes an interest in your rebirth, they might use you as a subject for repeated experiments, and I can't let you be treated like a lab monkey. Ryan hugged me again, holding on for a long time. It's all my fault. If I hadn't held him up with endless questions that day, he could have made the first evacuation flight, and we could have escaped. Ryan's voice was filled with despair. My nose tingled with sadness. But how could I blame Ryan? It was because he wanted to ask Kyle about my rebirth that we were delayed. Now that Kyle is dead, the chance of me being reborn again might never come, and we are trapped here with only death awaiting us. With tears welling up in my eyes, I wrapped my arms around Ryan's waist and said softly, "It's not your fault. Kyle would definitely want you to live well. I don't want to drag Ryan down with me. If it could secure his chance of survival, I'm willing to make that call. Perhaps this is the meaning of my rebirth. At least I can save him, and there is still hope for us to live." Suddenly, I felt a cold sensation beneath me. I had a bad feeling, reached down, and touched. Just as I feared, my period had started. I had thought I might be reborn back, so I hadn't brought a new sanitary pad down. This time my period was delayed for quite a while, and when it came, it was unusually heavy. All I could do was blush and tell Ryan, who didn't hesitate to go fetch some things for me. As soon as we opened the sealed safety door of the basement, the zombies outside, visible through the surveillance cameras, became restless and started banging on the walls and windows. Damn it, this apocalypse is really unforgiving for women. I hurried into the small bathroom, locking the door tightly behind me. The basement was empty, devoid of any furniture, and the cold, icy floor was not suitable for sleeping. The upstairs, however, was relatively safe, and it was convenient to retreat to the basement in case of danger, so we had been sleeping on the solid wood floor of the study. No, I couldn't just give up. I had to continue finding ways to survive. On the days of my period, I dared not leave the basement. After Ryan brought me the sanitary products, he went to fetch the bedding and other necessities. Changing my underwear and sanitary pad wasn't enough. I also needed to change my thermal pants and quickly wash off the blood stains Ryan, I need to change my thermal pants too, I said awkwardly, knocking on the bathroom door. I'll gather the laundry, just stay inside. I'll wash the dirty clothes, don't worry about it, he said from outside before hurriedly running off. We only had 2 sets of thick clothes to change into, and I had just washed 1 set yesterday, because it was cold and damp, and we dared not open the curtains on the first floor. The clothes were hanging to dry in a south-facing room on the second floor. For now, I could only remove my blood-stained thermal pants, rinse them in the sink to dilute the blood, and shiver as I waited for him. Soon, I faintly heard a loud boom from the surveillance cameras outside. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly pulled on some cleaner outer pants and ran to check the monitors. The scene almost stopped my heart. The house's walls and windows were quite sturdy and the zombies hadn't gone completely berserk. So they were holding up, but to my horror, somehow a zombie had managed to climb onto the beautiful tiled roof of the small attic on the 3rd floor and had smashed a hole through it. It was now roaring as it charged downward. The world had gone mad. Our house, which had no burglar bars or anything that could aid zombies in climbing, somehow still had a zombie make it to the roof of the 3rd story. Seeing Ryan holding clothes and just coming downstairs, desperately running back, sent a cold sweat down my spine. I picked up a steel spike from the ground and ran to the stairs. At the basement door, I saw a small, fierce zombie lunging towards Ryan, who had just dashed into the study. As its filthy, sharp claws were raised high, my mind exploded in panic, and I screamed, "Ryan!" The zombie suddenly turned towards me, its deep red, murky eyes glaring menacingly, like a devil eyeing a blood feast. "Get back!" Ryan shouted at me. Using the moment, the zombie paused to rush forward and tackle it by the waist, flipping it onto the ground. He was risking his life to save me. In that instant, I snapped back to reality. I saw Ryan, his arms wrapped in clothing to fend off the zombie's sharp teeth, his face flushed red, his jacket already torn in several places by the zombie's claws. The zombies outside were furiously banging on the window. Without a second thought, I rushed forward and plunged the spike into the zombie's head with all my might. Kill it. Save Ryan. I was in a frenzy. 1 stab, 2 stabs, dark, filthy blood and yellow, foul-smelling brain matter splattered everywhere. "Let's go." Ryan struggled to his feet, tightly gripping my arm. Only then did I snap out of my fear and madness. The glass continued to resound with thuds, and the frenzied howls of zombies outside were terrifyingly close. I hastily dragged the head-blasted zombie to a bookcase, hoping to mask our scent. Then Ryan pushed me into the room and staggered back a few steps himself. "Come on, get in here." I anxiously turned back to look at him. Ryan was gasping for breath, his body trembling, yet he stood frozen in place. Suddenly, it felt as if a needle had violently pierced my brain. I rushed to him, frantically wiping the blood that smeared his head and face. His pale face bore no wounds, neither did his neck, but when I tore open his tattered down jacket, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. His apricot sweater was ripped in several places, soaked in a glaring, fresh red. It's all right, not all zombie scratches lead to infection," I said, shaking my head desperately, trying to suppress my uncontrollable sobs. He couldn't die, couldn't turn into a zombie. I hadn't even had the chance to tell him I liked him. Ryan's eyes were also red as he slowly lifted his right hand. The sight of a flesh-torn bite mark below his wrist shattered my last hope. I felt all strength drain from my body, the world around me turning bleak. "I'm sorry, Scarlett. I can't stay with you anymore. Call Owen. You must find a way to survive, find my parents, take care of them, go now." His once bright black eyes turned increasingly bloodshot. It seemed he had much more to say, yet no chance to say it. "Ryan, I like you. Don't leave me, Ryan." My vision blurred with tears. I held him tightly and refused to let go, but he pushed me ruthlessly, mercilessly, into the basement. Then the heavy door closed, sealing away all my hopes. At the same time, the sound of breaking glass came from outside. I tumbled down the stairs, pain piercing through my limbs, but I struggled to climb up step by step. He had promised never to leave me. It couldn't be. It's just death. I'm not afraid of dying, but I fear never seeing him again. The sound of heavy pounding came from outside the door, my tears unstoppable. My trembling hands struggled to press the door lock, but just as I was about to open the door, I stopped abruptly. "You know, I am a person capable of rebirth. I absolutely cannot give up." Wiping away my tears fiercely, I stumbled back to the basement. I needed to call Owen, tell him I could be reborn, get the base to send someone to rescue me. Although Kyle was gone, if other scientists knew there really was a person who could be reborn, they would surely study this direction and try to change history. So what if I had to be a lab monkey? What if the chances of success were slim? As long as there was even a slight hope, I must go back to save him. Finally getting hold of the satellite phone, I looked up at the camera monitor in the study, and was instantly stunned. In the surveillance video, 6 or 7 ferocious zombies were smashing around a bookshelf, and there was Ryan, standing behind them with bloodshot eyes, completely ignored. I covered my mouth to stifle my sobs, but I couldn't hold back tears of joy. Persisting really did mean there was no insurmountable path. Then I saw him pick up a steel spike from the ground, forcefully plunging it into a zombie's head. One by one, the zombies fell, none resisting. Soon after, the basement door reopened. Ryan slowly came down, removing his ruined clothes to reveal many ragged and fierce wounds. His eyes still held a trace of bloodshot, but they were clear and bright. He smiled at me, showing his big white teeth. Unbearably handsome, I rushed to him and held tightly to his still warm body. I will never let go again. Did I just hear someone say they like me? Ryan said, holding me tight. I nodded desperately, but I was too choked up to speak. What a coincidence. I was just about to say, I like you too. His gentle voice entered my ears, and my tears gushed out like a breached dam. Soon after, Owen received a call from Ryan and was ecstatic. 3 days later, the government sent a helicopter rescue team. The vaccine production technology was quite mature. The only thing missing was safe antibodies from immune individuals. There were immune individuals, but all were infectious. Only Ryan was not only immune with the necessary antibodies but also safe, with Ryan's blood as a culture medium. A zombie antibody vaccine was soon mass-produced. Armed with the antibodies, soldiers could freely move among and pursue zombies without fear of attack. Humanity finally launched a major counterattack, with Ryan hailed as a hero who saved humanity. 3 years later, the world announced the elimination of the last zombie. That day, Ryan and I went to Kyle's grave to lay flowers. Brother, thank you. You are the real hero who saved the world, end of main text, extra. That day, I drank too much and felt terrible. Ignoring the host's displeasure, I left the private room early. A fresh-faced girl suddenly appeared, shaking her head and asking me, "Hey, handsome, do you have a girlfriend?" Her clean, straight black hair draped over her shoulders, her eyes red and swollen, clearly having cried for a long time, perhaps to drown her sorrows. "Please get out of my way." After a brief glance, I sidestepped her. She looked a bit hurt, bowed her head slightly, and staggered back without another word. For some reason, after walking a bit, I couldn't help but look back. I saw a man jokingly trying to chat her up. She tried to leave after rejecting him, but the man laughed and reached out to pull her, only to receive a slap from her. Seeing the man about to lose his temper, I suddenly felt very annoyed, stepped forward quickly, and pushed the man away. "I don't have a girlfriend. Would you come with me?" I said to her. Her eyes, red and blurry with tears, looked at me with surprise. Then she nodded frantically. It felt like I had picked up a pitiful little kitten. At that moment, I felt something tugging at my heartstrings, so, amid the man's cursing, I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and left the noisy bar. Initially, I just wanted to prevent her from getting into trouble or being taken advantage of by men, planning to be the good guy and take her home, but I think I overestimated myself. Busy with work, and having not touched a woman since breaking up with my ex-girlfriend 4 years ago, sitting in the car watching her curl up beside me, I suddenly felt an uncontrollable urge. Perhaps it was the indulgence of alcohol, or maybe I had been single for too long. I couldn't stop myself. If she hadn't suddenly pushed me away, I really would have plunged in and not wanted to wake up later. The zombie crisis really did erupt, and I was glad I believed her words, allowing us to escape in time to the Joshi villa. I thought Kyle's connections would bring help soon, but he suddenly lost contact. That month was agonizing. I worried about Kyle and didn't know where hope lay for me and her. She never mentioned that night again. Sometimes I think, maybe I was just a momentary cure for her heartbreak. If it weren't for this zombie crisis, we might have each gone our separate ways. Yet, it might also mark the beginning of our shared destiny. There's this inexplicable feeling, as if she has cried in my arms many times, and at times reacted with the startled ferocity of a wild kitten. Each time, I find myself moved by compassion and stirred by emotion for her. She lacks a sense of security and is timid, yet she is strong, she is emotional and has her own principles. Everything about her is so clear. I've realized I like such simple, straightforward girls. I can't help but want to protect her. However, in these apocalyptic times, I dare not promise to keep her safe, as I'm unsure of her feelings and hesitate to overstep. If we can escape safely, I would definitely tell her that I like her, even if it's the end of the world. I hope to be by her side till the end. Although I know she can be reborn, I don't want to see her suffer again, nor do I want these days together to be erased from my memory. Fortunately, she didn't take the medication, or I would have been driven to despair. After being bitten, it felt as if my body was thrown into boiling oil, torn apart in agony, driving me to the brink. I finally understand the pain she has endured time and again. I'm sorry, I can only protect her one last time, hoping she never has to endure such unbearable pain again. Glancing at my phone, it's 2:50 a.m., so I asked Owen, who after some thought, nodded solemnly. Perhaps in 10 or 20 years, other scientists might discover a method to change history, allowing us to bring Kyle back to life or even prevent the zombie apocalypse from occurring, as long as we persist. Miracles can happen, right? Through Owen, I learned about finding the time coordinates. that can reverse time and resurrect people, akin to finding a needle in a haystack within the capacity of a supercomputer to create a highly complex antivirus program. Theoretically, any ordinary person can be reborn at these time coordinates, provided their body's magnetic field matches the loophole. Besides spatial coordinates, we cannot choose the time coordinates or the carrier, the person who can be reborn. Thus, if someone is reborn, it's not because they are special, they just happened to be the right carrier for those specific time coordinates. Then, I roughly figured out why Scarlet was reborn. The first time Scarlet bit me, my immune constitution allowed me to survive being bitten and thus live among the zombies after developing immunity. I would then call Kyle immediately to explain the situation and tell him the specifics and location, knowing I'm immune. He would definitely find someone to rescue me quickly and rush back to the country, catching the first flight home. However, I might have had an accident later, not surviving until the rescue, while the zombie vaccine remained undeveloped. Eventually, Kyle found the time loophole coordinates set for that night at 11:53 p.m., with the spatial coordinates set to the hotel where I was. He intended for me to be the one reborn. It was a gamble, a matter of human fate, dependent on whether my body's magnetic field could match that moment. Clearly, I wasn't suitable, but fortunately, Scarlet, who was in my arms, had a body magnetic field suitable for rebirth at that moment, so she became the one who was reborn. That night, Scarlet finding me was fate arranged by the heavens. She was an angel sent by God. Now, looking at the woman sleeping sweetly beside me, the unfinished business of that night, we have a lifetime ahead to slowly settle.